Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku was Shirakumo Oboro's little brother? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Aizawa Shoyuta hasn't seen or heard anything of Shirakumo Oboro in over a decade, mostly by design, but he's thought of him every day since his death. Which is why, when he sees the boy with wispy mist floating from the strands of his hair, his mind immediately goes to his lost friend. And then he watches Shirakumo Izuku, younger brother of Shirakumo Oboro, take down the zero-pointer, and he knows he's already identified one problem child of the year. It would be just Shura's luck that he's related to his greatest regret, though. The day had started so well too. He had sent Hitoshi off to his own exams knowing that even if his son starts at UA in Gen Ed he would make it into the hero course eventually, just like Shoyuta had. The coffee maker in the teacher's lounge had brewed an acceptable cup of coffee, which it was always hit or miss on. The students he proctored during the written exams were quiet and subdued, so no issues there. Then Hizashi, who should have been explaining the hero course exam to a room of middle schoolers at the time, had sent him a very incoherent text message that could only have meant trouble. Scanning the heads of hero hopefuls waiting at the starting gates, it didn't take long to realize what that trouble was. Shirakumo Izuku. Quirk, fog, can control the humidity of the nearby area, creating a fog that typically becomes denser as its size grows smaller, making it capable of holding considerable weight. The picture on his file is a near match to Shura's memory of Oboro but overlaid with a soft green instead of that bright blue. Same facial features, the same smile. The ends of Izuku's curly hair trail into green tendrils of fog, and even in the photo his eyes seem to glow bright green. Shura's attention doesn't stray from Shirakumo throughout the entire exam. He displays an impressive amount of control of his quirk, even if Shura's critical eye can see room for improvement. His clouds aren't quite like Oboro's, who made large, fluffy monstrosities and used them as his personal purse and carriage, but Izuku uses this to his advantage, weaving the fog together to create tiny, solid platforms, hoisting himself into the air and kicking down hard on the robots from above. A solid strategy considering his control of humidity isn't as naturally destructive as the quirks of most other contenders in the exams. He uses them defensively, too, creating dense shields from thin air to block hits aiming for himself and, when possible, other examinees. If his villain points were lacking, which they might be solely due to the unfortunate quirk matchup, he is surely at least gaining rescue points. Those are what Shoyuta really cares about, anyway. A hero should always prioritize saving lives over destruction. Then the zero-pointer appears, and Shoyuta knows what will happen the second before it does. Oboro had always been reckless, had never once considered abandoning someone in need, and of course that trait would happen to be genetic. Izuku charges forward, crouching in front of the girl trapped beneath the rubble, unafraid of the robots stomping towards them. Then he whirls to face the zero-pointer, eyes flaring with mist as if a fog machine was lodged in his skull. Shoyuta wonders what he's trying to accomplish, since he sees nothing until the zero-pointer shudders, sparking as it collapses to the ground in a heap. Heavy fog leaks from its vents like sludge. Beside him, Nizu cackles gleefully. Not good. How fascinating. Care to explain what just happened? Shoyuta is glad Namuri has the ball to ask, because he's curious but doesn't have the energy to deal with that look on Nizu's face. Isn't it obvious? The rat asks as he takes a sip of his tea, even though it clearly isn't obvious. Shirakumo increased the humidity within the robot, short-circuiting its wiring by causing water damage. Incredible. If he could do that, why wasn't he doing it before? Shoyuta mutters. If the kid was wasting his potential? Then, on screen, Izuku wobbles and clutches his forehead as he attempts to steady himself. It must require a lot of his energy to have created so much fog that it managed to damage the zero-pointer, Nizu explains just as Izuku's knees buckle and he falls to the ground. Not to worry. Shizenji is aware of the situation and has it handled. Room for improvement then, Shoyuta offers. He's still conscious at least, so he knows his limits. Quite right. and I'm sure you'll have a wonderful time honing his skills as his teacher next year. You've decided he'll be my problem so quickly? Give him to Vlad. I want nothing to do with Shirakumo, although I'm sure you already know that. Oh, I've had the classes organized since the exam ended. Shirakumo will surely excel under your tutelage, Aizawa, and I know you well enough to expect that you not allow personal connections affect your treatment of the students. Am I incorrect in that assumption? Gritting his teeth, Shoyuta groaned, it has nothing to do with personal connections. I'd simply prefer to not deal with another problem child this year. Namuri laughed under her breath. All your students are problem children, Shoyuta. Yes, but this one will be a problem child with emphasis. Unfortunately, the time before school starts goes exactly as Shoyuta expects it to. Hitoshi is placed in Gen Ed, which he is understandably disappointed about, but at least he's determined to prove his worth in the sports festival. Shuta's class list is full of problem children, as it is every year, including a boy that placed second in the entrance exam with only villain points who will undoubtedly be an issue in class. And of course, Shirakumo Izuku is in 1A as well, just as Nizu promised. He had managed to earn 23 villain points, impressive, with a quirk lacking offense and an additional 60 rescue points, ranking him first. On the first day, Shoyuta sneaks into the room when no one's paying attention like he always does, and he observes. Naturally, the seating chart placed Izuku right behind the villain points boy, Bakugo Katsuki, conveniently putting the most problematic of the problem children in one place. From his position unnoticed on the floor, Shoyuta watches the two interact. His smile is just like Oboro's. It hurts to see. Bakugo is busy sneering about something, while Izuku seemingly attempts to placate him with only moderate success. Every small explosion fired from the blonde's palms are easily, almost instinctively, blocked from spreading outward by thick fog, but Bakugo continues his tirade without pause, gesturing to the classroom at large and complaining about the presence of damn extras ruining his reputation by association and glaring particularly viciously at Ida Tenya. With a weary look, Izuku just pushes Bakugo back into his seat, pointing to the clock as the class bell rings, and he finally quiets even if he does growl something under his breath, which Izuku sighs at. A small section of his brain is reminded of Oboro, who was always able to sense when Hisashi's energetic enthusiasm was getting to be too much, always able to settle him and redirect his attention until he calmed down. They're clearly familiar with each other. Hopefully the friendship, if that's what that was between them, will reduce the problem children's trouble rather than multiply it, but that seems to be an unlikely expectation. Shoyuta waits for the students to notice him and settle. 8 seconds, not too bad to start, but they'll have to get better. He tells them so. Then he directs them to grab their gym uniforms and meet him on the field for his annual quirk assessment. He ignores the flash of something passing over Izuku's face at the sight of him and hopes it wasn't recognition. Contrary to popular belief amongst his students, Shoyuta doesn't really care about the strength of his students' quirks. It would be rather hypocritical of him, after all, since his own quirk would not give him any obvious advantage on any of the physical assessments. A quirk is only a tool in a hero's arsenal, and Shoyuta is only concerned with how his students use those tools to their advantage when they approach these tests. While some quirks act like a hammer and are simple to use to one's advantage, Bakugo's explosion, for example, he's curious to see how the kids with less offensively oriented quirks hold themselves in this situation. Their potential lies not in the strength of their quirks but in the creativity of how they use them. He's slightly surprised when the designated problem students are the first out of the locker rooms. Bakugo strides forward like he's walking into a battle he has already won, with an unearned cockiness that Shuta's eager to wring out of him over the course of the year. Izuku, at his side, is shyer in his gait, glancing behind himself periodically to stare incredulously at the exterior of the school behind him. Shoyuta recognizes the look in his eyes as disbelief, as if he's amazed he has gotten this far. When they approach, Izuku nods respectfully in greeting and not so subtly kicks Bakugo in the shin when his friend tilts his chin upward haughtily. Shoyuta returns the nod, acknowledges their efficiency being the first on the field, and looks away from Izuku's imploring, searching gaze as he waits for the rest of the students. The two students bicker, one more quietly than the other, as the others start to join the group. Bakugo promises that, whatever competition will be, he will pound the extras into the dust and be the best. More gently, Izuku says, "Kaken, we don't even know what we're doing yet. Besides," and suddenly a determined smile stretches across his face, "I'll be sure to give you a run for your money, so watch me." Bakugo responds with his own devious sneer. That determination, that excited grin, is so achingly familiar. He uses Bakugo for his demonstration, since he scored in the top 5 and his explosion can clearly show the difference a quirk can make in a physical assessment. The students' realization that they're free to use their quirks however they please is accompanied with their cheers of excitement, but Shoyuta goes cold when he hears someone use the word fun. Fun? Hero work isn't playtime. If you're here for fun, you're in the wrong profession. Whoever shows the least amount of potential and ends up in last place will be expelled. As expected, this receives a chorus of protests from his students, but Shoyuta does not make empty threats. It's for good reason. A hero that doesn't take his job seriously is a dead hero, and he refuses for any of his students to end up that way. He thinks of a student, a friend crushed beneath the weight of a building and the weight of others' failures. The fear of expulsion has created a more serious atmosphere over the students. Only Bakugo is seemingly immune, unconcerned by the threat as he faces each challenge head-on and usually with a cry of "die" to accompany him. At least, Shoyuta admits, his confidence isn't entirely unfounded, even if it is a bit premature. He scores high on all of the tests, even the ones that his quirk isn't useful for. He's clearly been training his body alongside his quirk, which at least says something about his determination to succeed. The rest of the students perform reasonably well too. The versatility of Yaoyorozu's quirk easily lands her in the top scores of each test, and Todoroki has obviously trained his own quirk for years and has an incredible grasp on his ice, although Shoyuta will need to address his hesitation of using fire, since he seems to avoid it at every opportunity. Izuku pauses before each of his tests, as if analyzing the best approach to each situation, which is wonderfully refreshing from a student. For the long jump, he's so deep in thought that Shoyuta has to call a tired Shirakumo when he misses his turn. He doesn't realize until then that it's the first time he has referred to Izuku by his family name, even mentally. Calling him Shirakumo only solidifies the connection between Izuku and Oboro when Shoyuta is doing everything in his power to distance his student from a ghost. "Sensei?" Izuku calls as he approaches the sand pit. The only objective is to not touch the ground, right? That is correct. Izuku grins, his eyes streaming with dense fog as a small, misty platform hovers in front of him. He hops vertically, landing on it easily, then forms another platform just a couple inches away which he steps onto. From the sidelines, Bakugo curses. "Little sheet's just gonna go forever," he growls as Izuku easily walks over the sand and further across the field, creating footholds of fog under each step. Shoyuta gives him a score of infinity for the long jump. The ball throw is the last test of the assessment, and Shoyuta has Bakugo go again to be fair to the other students. Grinning, Bakugo shakes out his arms. "I'll put my last score to shame," he promises, then launches the ball with a bang. It makes it only 19.7 meters. For a moment, everyone is silent, staring at where the ball fell in the dirt after colliding with a wall of fog. Then, Bakugo whirls on Izuku, palms popping with explosions. "Shitty fucking Deku, what the F wa dash?" Instinctively, Shoyuta lashes out with his capture weapon and restrains Bakugo before he can land a hit. His eyes flare red to keep Bakugo from burning through the capture weapon with his explosions. No unauthorized quirk used to injure another student, Bakugo. "Ah, I wasn't gonna do anything." And he used his quirk first. "Well, that is technically correct." Shirakumo explain. Oh, how that name burns like poison spilling from his mouth. Izuku shuffles shyly. "Well, my quirk is only helpful in some of the tests, and I really don't want to be expelled after working so hard to get here, but then I realize that I don't necessarily have to use my quirk to help myself. I just need to do better than my opponents. So, I sabotaged Kaken's ball toss. Do you think heroics is just a game to be won?" Breaking eye contact, Izuku clenches his fists. I'm fully aware that being a hero isn't a game and that it's dangerous. I know you're aware of what happened to my brother, Eraserhead Sensei. Shoyuta hasn't told his students his hero name yet. Izuku definitely recognizes him, then. I also know that, in a fight, it's not always enough to give yourself every possible advantage. You have to disadvantage your opponent at every opportunity. That can make the difference between victory and loss. You're aware of what happened to my brother? Definitely a problem child. But at least he's an interesting one. Nodding, Shoyuta releases Bakugu from the capture weapon. Shirakumo's reasoning is correct, so I'll allow it this once. But I do wish to see how your peers perform without any interference, so please refrain from doing that again. Yes, Sensei. Bakugu, your turn is over. Your score stands at 19.7 meters. Kirishima, you're up. Grumbling, Bakugu stomps back toward Izuku, but he doesn't seem inclined to attack, so Shoyuta just lazily watches them from the corner of his eye. Izuku smiles at his friend bashfully but doesn't flinch from the blonde's glare. Eventually, Bakugo huffs, loses steam, and watches the rest of the students finish their assessment with Izuku. When the students finish, he sends them back to the locker room while he looks over the scores. He had promised to expel the student with the least potential, and he'd meant it, but that didn't necessarily translate to the student ranking in last place like he'd implied. After all, Hagakure Toru's quirk hadn't been well suited to any of the tests, but she maintained an upbeat attitude throughout the assessment and genuinely seemed to try her best despite the odds. She didn't deserve to be expelled just because invisibility didn't grant her any form of super strength or speed. She had the potential to make a decent underground hero. Instead, Shoyuta places Mineta Minoru in the lowest position. His quirk is interesting in all fairness, but the boy has an annoying, whiny personality that Shoyuta really doesn't want to deal with for the rest of the year. And he's pretty sure he'd seen him leering perversely at some of the girls during the assessment, and that's definitely something Shoyuta doesn't want to deal with for the rest of the year. In all honesty, Mineta is lucky Shoyuta can only expel him. The scores are displayed neatly on the chalkboard by the time the students return to the classroom. The Todoroki boy is the first one back, and he only glances neutrally at the scores as he takes his seat, seemingly disinterested in his placement as runner-up. Yaoyorozu at least appears excited about her ranking highest in the class. Bakugu, seeing his name listed in fourth, spins on Izuku behind him. Iwan nerd. We're watching the original All Might movie tonight, and you're buying the snacks. Izuku, who placed sixth, hums. You did beat me, but Kaken, didn't you say you'll beat everyone else? You didn't even make the top 3. Huh. You're the one that needs to do better, Deku. I won't be a hero partner with anyone less than the best, you hear me? It's gotta be us two at the top, so meet me there. Let's form an agency, the 3 of us. We'll be a team. You have to actually be at the top for me to meet you there, Kaken. Shoyuta is thankful, like he is every year, that the desks are resistant to most types of damage, because otherwise Bakugu would be destroying his much more effectively. He's too exasperated to put a stop to it, though, and Bakugu isn't hurting anyone, so he just lets him wear himself out. The rest of the students trail in slowly, most looking relieved by their placements above last place. When Mineta finally stumbles in and stares at the board in horror, Shoyuta just points at the door and he leaves in a stunned daze. Now there'll be an open spot in his class for Hitoshi to transfer into. His kid just needs to prove his worth at the sports festival, and everything will fall neatly into place. That's all I expect of you for today. Take a syllabus on your way out and come prepared tomorrow. He grabs his sleeping bag and goes to wait for Hitoshi in the teacher's lounge. When the day is finally over, him and Hitoshi walk back to their house nearby, and Hitoshi tells him about his day, promising that everyone left Hisashi's class with their eardrums still intact at the end of the day. Then, he asks about Shuta's day, and Shoyuta only huffs in reply. Hitoshi rolls his eyes. I bet all those hero kids are demon annoying, huh? Everything handed to them on a silver platter with their perfect kadash. Shoyuta slaps him upside the head gently. You're too bitter, he scolds, and Hitoshi sighs. Okay, maybe only most of them are like that, he acquiesces. Shoyuta doesn't argue this, since it's partly true. Hey, are there any cute boys in your class? There's no one really that cute in Gen Ed, but maybe there's someone in the other courses. Hitoshi, it would be unethical of me as a teacher to say that any of the literal children in my class qualify as cute. If you want to answer that, you'll have to meet them yourself. He briefly considers introducing Hitoshi to Izuku and wonders if the attraction to Shirakumo boys is a trait that will run in the Aizawa family. He says nothing of it. All Might is certainly a teacher. Shoyuta doesn't know what adjective preceding teacher can be accurate without being cruel. The drill he runs with the students on their first day of heroics is sloppy at best. To pit children with no combat training against each other is far from anything Shoyuta had recommended when All Might had asked his advice, yet it's what the hero decided to do anyway. At least the footage is valuable for Shoyuta, since he can analyze his students for their inherent weaknesses and strengths, and he can work with them from there. The students, though, don't gain anything from it aside from a few serious bruises and, in Izuku's case, burns. A dark turtleneck and black, baggy pants lined with pockets tucked into glaring red high tops. Red-tinted aviator goggles pushing back curly green hair lined with fog. A painfully familiar bomber jacket, forest green instead of that dark brown. A nitroglycerin-fueled explosion, and the building crashes down around him. It happened again. Thankfully, no one was seriously hurt in the chaos, but Shoyuta is sure All Might will try actual training next time after his reprimands. His teaching career at UA has so far only served to be a nuisance. Shoyuta and Hizashi spent their morning before classes attempting to defuse a swarm of reporters, for instance, and he had to deal with the fallout when they somehow broke through the gate, and so far, Shoyuta is inclined to believe that All Might will only be more trouble than he's worth. He'll have the chance to prove his capability as a teacher at the unforeseen simulation joint. Of course, he would have actually needed to show up to the USJ for that to happen. Instead, the buffoon used up all his time for the day and will no longer be making an appearance, leaving Shoyuta and 13 to handle 19 rowdy kids by themselves. Ridiculous. The training is already off to a poor start. Things get much worse. Izuku, surprisingly, is the first to sense something is off. All day, his excitement for the rescue training has been visible, and he's been watching 13 with sheer amazement since they walked into the USJ, but suddenly his attention is fully diverted. His head whips to the side, staring towards the center of the plaza. Shoyuta instinctively follows his gaze, but nothing is there. Then, something is there. A thick, black fog is forming in the center of the plaza, expanding rapidly. Confused, Shoyuta glances to Izuku, but his student looks just as alarmed as he feels. Not his doing. Kirishima, unable to read a room, asks if this is the start of the training exercise. Bakugo answers for Shoyuta, more crudely than anything he would have said, and Shoyuta watches as people-villains begin to step through the darkness. Not just a fog. A warp gate. One of the villains scans the group of teachers and students wearily. Wasn't All Might supposed to be here today? We came here to kill him, after all. Of course. All of Shuta's problems lately tie back to that buffoon. 13, stay back with the students. Try to get a signal out to UA. I'll handle this. Wait, sensei. Shoyuta turns. Izuku stands at the front of the cluster of students. His hands are shaking. You can't erase that many quirks. Fighting so many opponents at once. Scoffing, Shoyuta pulls his goggles over his eyes, tucks his face into his scarf, and hopes that is enough to conceal his internal trepidations. He can't let his students think he lacks confidence right now. You can't be a hero with just one trick. 13, I'm leaving them to you. Ignoring the protests behind him, he darts into the epicenter. Unfortunately, Izuku is right in his assessment of Eraserhead's capabilities. Shoyuta is not suited to directly fight so many enemies at once. He became an underground hero, specifically for that reason, and preferred ambush and stealth tactics over a full-out brawl. But his students are depending on him right now, and he can't afford to fail. Encouragement from a ghost, long ago. You're the only one who can protect everyone. You can do it, Shoyuta. He'll fight them with everything he has. He won't lose. He easily falls into a rhythm, surprised to realize that the entirety of these villains' strength is in their numbers. Their combat abilities are subpar, and he easily restrains and incapacitates them with a single hit. When he's knocked most of them down, a scrawny man gripped by several disembodied hands rushes him. He's the leader. Shoyuta lunges for him, throwing out his capture weapon and using it for leverage to yank himself closer. Once he's in range, he shoves his elbow into the man's stomach, only for it to be stopped by the palm of a hand. "It's hard to tell with you moving so much," the leader rasps in Shuta's ear. A sudden, searing pain begins spreading from his elbow, and Shoyuta gasps. "But your hair falls every time you finish erasing a quirk. It's happening more often the longer you fight." Ripping himself from that awful grasp, Shoyuta jumps backwards. The skin on his arm has eroded, leaving exposed muscle and bone behind, but he can only cover it with his other hand as more villains lunge for him. He fights them off, giving himself some space, but his eyes burn and his lungs heave by the time he pushes them back. "Your quirk just isn't suited for a fight like this, is it? This is too different from the short, ambush fights you're good at. So why did you jump in so quickly, Eraserhead? Was it just to put your students at ease? By the way," and now there's a looming presence behind him, something big, "I'm not the final boss." A monster reaches for him, and he can do nothing. Everything goes red. The next instant, Shoyuta is face down on the ground, the heavy weight of the beast pinning down his lower half. Blood drips from his forehead and into his eyes, and Shoyuta is suddenly aware that his goggles are missing. Then he's aware only of the splitting pain racing through his arm as the beast snaps his bone. He thinks the leader has been talking, but Shuta's awareness is hazy. It's all he can do to even hold on to consciousness, but he needs to focus. Wonderful power, but it's not very impressive. When faced with such overwhelming power, you might as well be quirkless. No, his quirk isn't anything special, but it's something. Desperately, Shoyuta manages to lift his head. He activates Erasure and attempts to remove the beast's strength. His other arm is broken in retaliation. Even with his quirk erased, that monster stepped on his arm like it was nothing more than a twig. It's just that strong. Right now, Shoyuta is utterly powerless. He's weak. When it grabs his head, Shoyuta can do absolutely nothing as it slams him into the concrete below. Except his head collides with something much too soft to be the stone pathway of the USJ Plaza. Opening his eyes, he can only see hazy green before it abruptly fades away, and he gently falls the short distance to the pavement below. A cloud, a cloud, a cloud. The villain blinks, confused, and scratches at his neck. Where did that? Who? Suddenly, a figure composed of black smoke appears beside him, interrupting the villain's agitation. Shoyuta, though, squints because he knows one person who could. There, in the water and only barely out of sight, crouch Izuku and Azui. "Tamura, I incapacitated 13 and dispersed most of the students. However, one of the ones I missed managed to escape." The frantic scratching picks up. "If you weren't our way out, I would crush you to pieces," the villain Tamura growls. "We can't win this when the other pros show up. It's game over. Let's go home." They're leaving? If their goal was only to kill All Might, then there was nothing for them here without him. But they've already caused this much trouble. It wasn't adding up. "Oh, before we go," faster than Shoyuta can follow in his addled state, Tamura lunges toward the water. He's going for the kids. "Let's kill some little heroes." Tamura reaches for Izuku for Shirakumo, with that hand that makes flesh flake from bone, and smiling face, never to smile again, dead. Shirakumo Oboro is dead. Shoyuta erases his quirk before he can make contact. "Damn it," Tamura growls, letting his hand fall away from Izuku's horrified, thankfully uninjured, face. "You really are cool, Eraserhead." This time when the monster cracks his skull against concrete, there's no cloud to cushion the impact. The pain is astonishing, and while he fights to stay conscious, it takes more energy than he currently has to lift his head again. But he remembers that he still has 2 students, nearly defenseless, only inches from a villain that could kill them with a single touch, and he picks himself up anyway. His eyes take a second to focus, and during that time Shoyuta can only see blurs of movement across from him. In the next instant, the excruciating weight on his back suddenly disappears, and he can register the scene before him. A veil of fog has rolled in front of Tamura, obscuring the lake from view. The Nomu crashes forward and punches at the ground, splitting the stone with its force, and the fog is blown away. Azui and Izuku are already gone. Shoyuta only gets a moment of relief, though, before a shuddering crash echoes across the USJ. Struggling, he tries to sit himself up further to see what's going on, but his eyes refuse to focus once again. He thinks he can see the lumbering shape of the monster and hear Tamura's excited laughter, but he doesn't know the details, and everything is wrong. Then, a gentle hand settles on his shoulder, turning him onto his back as his head is cushioned by something soft. "It's okay, Aizawa-sensei. All Might's here. He's fighting the Nomu right now, but he led them away a bit, so we're gonna stay with you. Everyone's okay. Oboro. Izuku." Shura's eyes finally focus, and he finds Izuku's face hovering over his. When he attempts to sit up again, he can barely find the energy, his body is screaming in agony, and he's easily pushed back down by a pair of hands. He looks okay, maybe a little pale, and his voice sounded raspy, but not injured as far as he can tell. Azui is beside him, and she seems fine too. "They're saying that Nomu can kill All Might, Karo," Azui croaks. "It blew away all the fog with a punch," Izuku whispers. Why did his voice sound like that, so raspy? Was it because of the ringing in Shura's ears? I've only ever seen All Might do something like that before. There's a thundering crash nearby, and Shura's head splits with pain. The Nomu's really strong. Shoyuta can hear All Might threatening the villains, but his voice is too strained to be of any weight. Judging by the troubled looks on his students' faces, things are not going well. "Need to go," he rasps. If he and All Might died here, at least his kids might get out safe. "Sorry, Eraser, but we're not going to leave you here." Beside Izuku, Azui nods resolutely in agreement. If they survive today, they'd be good heroes. To close the gate and tear you apart is my job. Izuku flinches, and Shoyuta can see tears building along his bottom lashes. Kurogiri has All Might trapped in a warp gate, but it feels really similar to my fog. Maybe I can Kaken. An explosion rattles Shura's skull, and the pain is too much. He loses himself. When he comes to, chaos is still happening around him. How much time has he lost? How many kids has he lost? Dead, they're dead. "Kaken!" Izuku shouts. He and Azui are still with Shoyuta, safe. Why is he calling for Bakugo? A slew of green fog manifests in the corner of his vision but is abruptly broken by a large figure barreling through it. A shocked, "What the hell?" gasps from beside Shoyuta, and he realizes Bakugo is suddenly laid out flat beside him. "Kaken, are you all right?" "Fucker didn't even touch me." "Thank you for slowing it down, young Shirakumo. It gave me more time to get your friend out of the way." Finally, Shoyuta tracks down the behemoth of All Might, finding him at the end of a trail of debris with his arms crossed defensively over his chest. He is breathing heavily, and blood trickled from a cut on his eyebrow. He took a hit to protect Bakugo, Shoyuta realizes. Maybe Shoyuta can find some respect for him deep in his heart after all. People are talking now, but he doesn't know what they're saying. Why can't he focus? He doesn't even realize that his consciousness is fading until cool hands pat his cheeks, cautiously mindful of any open wounds. "Sorry, Aizo-sensei," Izuku whispers, "but you should really stay awake right now. I think Sensei fell asleep earlier, Karo, but we really shouldn't let it happen again." Bakugo stumbles to his feet. "I'm going to dash," and Shoyuta finds enough will to slap his capture weapon around all three of his nearby students. "Sensei! None of you," he wheezes, "are going anywhere. When did Bakugo even get here?" Izuku called out to him right before Shoyuta blacked out, he thinks, but what did he do in the time Shoyuta lost awareness? Were the other students in the middle of all this too? Were they safe? Shoyuta can hear voices nearby, one of them undeniably All Might's booming tone, but he can't pin the others. He has eyes on just 3 of his students right now. They are the ones he can protect, so he will keep them close. Bakugo is the only one who actually attempts to wrestle his way out of the scarf, but its grip only tightens and its fabric is fireproof, so Shura's sure he's not going anywhere. Neither Azui nor Izuku fight the restraint, their attention locked on the battle that Shoyuta can only hear right now, his vision fading once again. And it's loud. Every crash of force cracks painfully against his head, but Izuku is absent-mindedly tapping a rhythm against his shoulder, giving Shoyuta something to focus on so he can stay awake. He has to stay awake. If All Might fails, he needs to be able to protect these kids. Somehow. You're the only one who can protect everyone. Oi, Deku, you're gonna pass out. Stop it. Shoyuta hazily shifts his gaze toward Izuku. His eyes are flaring with fog as he watches the fight. He must be using his quirk, overusing it. When Izuku speaks, his voice sounds like he hasn't had a drink of water for weeks. I can slow them down, he rasps. All Might, he's struggling. I can tell. If I can help even a little. Shirakumo, you're hurting yourself. She's right. Izuku is so pale, swaying dangerously. Shoyuta so desperately wants to erase Izuku's quirk, prevent him from falling into the dangerous pit of quirk exhaustion, but he can't do anything. With his arms still restrained by Shura's capture weapon, he rears back and headbutts Izuku hard in the forehead. Immediately, the fog in Izuku's eyes fizzles out as he yelps in surprise. Shitty Deku, fucking stop that. All Might's the best, he doesn't need help. Young Bakugo is correct. All Might booms, loudly enough that Shoyuta can hear him over the ringing in his ears. All of you stay back. But All Might dash. I appreciate all your help, young Shirakumo. Thanks. But it's fine. Just watch as a pro gives it everything he's got. Hadn't 13 said All Might ran out of time earlier? If that was true, then he's at his limit. Shakily, Shoyuta fights against every cell in his body and sits up. He can get to his feet, he can protect his kids. The Nomu and All Might collide. The impact explodes outward, blowing everybody back. Running on pure adrenaline, Shoyuta forces himself to land on his feet, buckling under his own weight until Izuku props a shoulder under his armpit to support him. Further away, he sees Azui, Todoroki and Kirishima. They were here too? Just how many kids has he failed today? Caught by soft clouds of green fog. Izuku wobbles, almost sending Shoyuta down with him, but Bakugo appears in front of them, supporting their weight against his back with a muttered curse. We're going, Aizawa decides, but it's a futile effort. Only Izuku and Bakugo can hear him over the deafening winds caused by the battle, and he can't even move, not when his students are the only reason he's able to brace himself against the extreme force threatening to push him back. Go beyond. Plus ultra. And the Nomu explodes against the side of the dome. In the center of the plaza, smoke rolls off of All Might as he threatens the remaining villains. He's out of time. Izuku and Bakugo snap their attention to Shoyuta, catching him when his attempt to take a step ends with him slumping pathetically. He can't. He's bluffing. Tamura Shigaraki, if we work together, we can still kill him. The villains charge. They'll kill him. Uselessly, Shoyuta fails again to move. He's at his limit. Deku. Right. Suddenly, All Might is obscured by green fog, and Bakugo grabs Izuku by the waist as he falls bonelessly. Kurogiri's mist slams against the edge of the modified smokescreen, seemingly unable to breach it, and Shigaraki stutters to stop. His gates, they're just humidity, Izuku rasps without even lifting his head, like mine. But I can't do anything with them, so I hoped he can't do anything to my fog. Nice going, nerd. This fog, it's a cheat code. Shigaraki whips around, his eyes latching in their direction. You're cheating. Hands outstretched, Shigaraki springs toward them, toward Izuku again. Bakugo frees one arm from Izuku's waist, readying an explosion, and Shoyuta prepares himself for the worst pain in his life so he can activate Erasure. He might only be able to use it for a moment, before his injuries overwhelm him, but if he times it right. A shot rings out, and Shigaraki's hand is blasted away. Another shot, and Shigaraki hops backwards to dodge it. Somewhere, Shoyuta hears the familiar yell of Hizashi using his quirk and realizes that the other heroes are here. They're safe now. Bakugo jostles him against his back. Oh, you better be awake back there. Deku's slipping, but he didn't get his head cracked like you did, so it's whatever. I'm fine, Kaken, Deku slurs. His fog surrounding All Might is thinning. Kurogyri has already backed away, beckoning Shigaraki toward a portal forming between them. Shoyuta understands that they're escaping and that should be bad, but right now he just wants them as far from his kids as possible. They disappear. Izuku, with a shuddering breath, releases the fog, revealing All Might in the center for a split second before a wall of concrete appears around him. Or, rather, revealing the emaciated form of Tashinori. All Might. Izuku gasps. Then he goes limp. Dead? Is he dead? Has he killed another Shirakumo? Fucker fell asleep. Bakugo curses as the sudden weight finally drags all three of them to the ground. Shoyuta, exhausted from fighting gravity for so long, lets himself slip off of Bakugo's form to lay flat on the ground. Neither of them say anything as they wait, but Shoyuta is sure that he'll have to deal with the problem children's questions when they're aware enough to actually ask them. Shizenji finally shows up, Hizashi trailing at her heels. Oh dear, if I had known this was your condition, I would have checked on you first. He's carefully loaded onto a stretcher by Hizashi while Bakugo explains that Izuku's isn't physically injured, but is probably severely dehydrated from quirk exhaustion. The kids. The little listeners are all okay, Shoyuta, Hizashi reassures. I'll heal your head trauma, and then you can rest, Aizawa. Shoyuta feebly stops Shizenji before she can touch him. Wait, Hizashi. Hitoshi. I'll get him to the hospital, no problem. Tell him it's just a red, not a black. Code red, not black, got it. Shizenji kisses him on the forehead, and Shoyuta finally can sleep. Shoyuta wakes up in the hospital. In the chair beside him, Hitoshi drops his phone into his lap and looks up when Shoyuta shuffles in the bed. Holy shit, Dad. You had to try and get yourself killed on a field trip. Shut up, brat. Despite the taunt, Shoyuta can see the redness of Hitoshi's eyes, how his fingers white-knuckle the bar of the hospital bed as he helps Shoyuta sit up. Considering his physical state at the USJ, Shoyuta feels relatively okay. His whole body aches, his arms especially, and his head is still pounding, but he can tell several people with healing quirks have had a go at him. He can feel the familiar itch of gauze around his torso, and the stiffness around his arms are probably from casts, but that's all he can visibly see wrong with him. What even happened? There was just an announcement across the school, and all our teachers left, and suddenly Uncle Zashi was telling me it was a code red. I didn't know what was going on. Villains attacked USJ. They were after All Might, who wasn't even there, and it was just 13 and I against all of them with 19 minors in the area with us. We had to defend ourselves until help arrived, which took longer than expected. When Hitoshi doesn't respond, Shoyuta lifts a plaster-wrapped arm and sets it softly on his head. I'm okay. I know, he sniffles, and Shoyuta allows him a moment to collect himself, knowing his son was uncomfortable with vulnerability. In fairness, Shoyuta wasn't exactly an expert of emotions either. Eventually, Hitoshi straightens his hunched shoulders and swipes Shuta's arm from his hair. Zashi went to get coffee. He'll probably be back soon, if he didn't get lost somewhere. Do you know how everyone else is? Hitoshi scoffs. I'm sure all the special little baby heroes are just fine. Hitoshi. No one's told me anything, okay? I didn't even know what happened to you. Just ask Zashi when he gets back. So, Shoyuta waits for Hizashi to return from his coffee run, which takes long enough that it seems likely that he really had gotten lost. He knows Shizenji said everyone was fine, but he's antsy. What if something changed in the time he's been asleep? He just wants some confirmation that, despite his shortcomings, the kids were all okay. Finally, Hizashi walks through the door. Unfortunately, he startles at the sight of Shoyuta sitting up in bed and drops his coffees on the floor. Hitoshi cries in outrage, staring at the cups spilling across the floor while Hizashi clutches his heart and takes a stuttering breath. Shoyuta, you were supposed to be asleep for like 2 more hours or something. Are the kids all right? 13. Hizashi stoops to pick up the coffee, attempting to kick the liquid back into the cups, which obviously isn't working. Everyone's fine. Shirakumo is the only one that was hospitalized, and he only needed treatment for dehydration, although it was pretty nasty. They'll have him on N4 for the rest of the night, then he'll be just fine. Sighing, Shoyuta lets himself relax. No one died. He didn't F up too badly. A thought strikes him. Did you see Inko? How was she? The last time he'd seen Mrs. Shirakumo was months before Oboro's death. She was a sweet woman, a bit fretful at times, but always unbearably kind to her son's misfit friends. Hizashi glances at Hitoshi. Not a word of this, Minisho. This is confidential information about students, got it? Hitoshi mimes zipping his lips, not even looking up from his phone. Confirming that Hitoshi wouldn't spread any of Izuku's personal information, Hizashi leans toward Shoyuta like he's about to tell a secret. Inko didn't show up. Huh. That couldn't be right. Bakuga Mitsuku and Bakuga Masaru are Shirakumo's emergency contacts on school record. I think the hospital might have called Inko, but as far as I know she hasn't been by. Just the Bakugu family. Have you talked to them? Not me, Hizashi admits. I saw them in the hallway earlier, but they seemed pretty determined to just get to Shirakumo's room, so I didn't want to annoy them. Nizu must have talked to them though. That's weird, Shoyuta admits. He remembers Inko as being almost overly protective of Oboro. It didn't seem to fit her character to not visit Izuku in the hospital. I know, right? Doesn't sound like her, but I guess we haven't seen her in a while, huh? Shoyuta can't really argue with that. That night, after Hizashi was shooed away by the same exasperated nurses who Shoyuta almost hissed at until they let Hitoshi continue sleeping in the chair beside his bed, Shuta's door creaks open. He's awake, with the ache in his arms being a bit too much for him to sleep comfortably, and he's glad for it when he sees Izuku's head peek into the room. His eyes widen when he realizes that Shoyuta is looking back at him. Come here, problem child, he whispers, beckoning Izuku forward with a stiff wave of a bandaged arm. For a moment, Izuku looks to consider bolting back out the door, but he drags his feet to Shuta's bedside in the end. Illuminated only by the dimmed light of a lamp, Shoyuta is pleased to see that Hizashi's statement that Izuku was uninjured seems to be correct. Hi, sensei, he greets awkwardly. Who's that? That's my son. Nothing can wake him up when he's out like that, so don't worry about him. Sit down. Izuku does so. Why are you here? Just wanted to make sure you were all right, he murmurs. I'm sorry. Shoyuta almost snorts. For what? Shrugging, Izuku gestures feebly at Shuta's wounds. You got hurt. That's not your fault, kid. Actually, the doctor said if I had taken another hit to the head by that Nomu, I would have been a lot worse off, and my quirk could have been damaged. The only reason that isn't the case is because you intercepted the blow and cushioned it. Izuku blinks in surprise. You did a good job, kid. If anything, I should be apologizing for not better protecting my students. But, sensei, you did protect us. You were amazing. You fought all those guys even though you were so outnumbered, and you beat them all. I've never seen anything like that. You're amazing, Shoyuta. I actually wanted to thank you, Izuku continues, bowing his head so the wisps of his hair fell over his eyes. I'm glad all of my friends got out safely, and I know that was all because of you. Thank you, sensei. It's my job, kid. He would do it all again in a heartbeat. It's more than that. Shoyuta is shocked, momentarily, by the conviction in Izuku's voice. I could have. What happened to my brother, it could have happened to me or to Kaken or any of us. We could have died. But you didn't let that happen. Shoyuta chokes. I know you were close friends with Oboro. I know you were there when. I know being a hero is dangerous. I didn't really think I'd be in a situation like that for a while, though, but when you jumped in like that, I felt like me and my friends were safe. Shoyuta thinks he's crying. He isn't sure. Izuku finally looks up, and his smile is wobbly but it's there. Just keep smiling even when things look bad. I'll be a hero like that someday. Someone who can make others feel safe just by their demeanor alone. That's the kind of hero I want to be. So, really, Thank you for keeping us all safe, sensei. Before Shoyuta can say another word, before he can even think of a response, because his brain has stuttered to an abrupt halt, Izuku stands. He leaves, and Shuta's mind reels. Returning to class the Monday following the USJ attack, with no days off for recovery, is not the recommended course of action by any of the medical staff, but Shoyuta does it anyway. He knows that the kids, both his students and Hitoshi, appreciate the attempt to retain normalcy after the unexpected events at the USJ. If he has to show up to his classes with both his arms in casts and drowsy on pain meds to achieve this illusion of stability and security, then that is a sacrifice he's willing to make. I felt like me and my friends were safe, Izuku had told him. It was for the same reason that he argued that the sports festival should continue as scheduled. His students have just experienced true vulnerability and helplessness, likely for the first time in their lives, and the sports festival will allow them to show their true strength and capabilities in a safe, controlled environment. Seeing their expressions after the announcement, the way Bakugu's jaw sets, how Uraraka's eyebrows furrow and Izuku's fists clench, Shoyuta knows he has made the right decision. Bakugu, Shirakumo, please stay behind for a moment. The rest of you, off to lunch. As his class goes to leave, there's a commotion just outside the doors. Students from the other classes are gathered in the hallway, declaring rivalry for the festival. Good, it'll give his class something normal to worry about, then. He can hear Hitoshi's voice out there too, but he turns his attention back to the problem students rather than listen in. I'm sure you both have plenty of questions. Bakugu scoffs, obviously. Ignoring him, Izuku leans over Shuta's desk to peer at him curiously. Are you alright? I didn't think you'd still be in cast today. Shoyuta blinks, a little surprised. He'd expected them to ask questions about the USJ, specifically about All Might and his apparent frailty, but Izuku is concerned about him? I'm fine, he answers slowly as his brain reboots. The bones have been reset already, but the quirk makes them fragile for a few days afterward. The casts are just to keep them from re-breaking. However, I'm sure you have additional questions of a more sensitive nature in regards to what you see at the USJ. You mean how All Might is apparently just some weak a-hole playing make-believe? Kaken. Don't be rude. Izuku elbows Bakugu in the gut, and Shoyuta is surprised that the blonde doesn't retaliate with his own brand of violence and explosions. Instead, he grumbles something petulantly under his breath, and Izuku nudges him again, but friendlier this time. We really looked up to All Might, he explained, as if Bakugu's comments had personally offended Shoyuta. They hadn't, and he was attempting to excuse his behavior. He was a great hero, is a great hero, but we can't help feeling. I don't even know. He's always seemed so cool, but to know that this whole time he was just human like the rest of us. It was all a load of bullshit and false bravado, Bakugu growls. Izuku glances at him, then finally shrugs in agreement. I guess it just feels kind of deceitful? He'd always seemed so honest. You just want to make sure we won't run our mouths, right? Gotta make sure we keep precious All Might's weakness a FANG secret. Well, that was a concern among those who know, Shoyuta admits, which includes only the UA staff at this point in time. Can I take that to mean you won't tell anybody then? Shaking his head, Izuku nudges Bakugu again. We won't tell anyone. Right, Kaken? Yeah, whatever. Shoyuta figures that's the best he'll get out of them, so he nods and sends them to join their friends in the lunchroom. If they have any other issues about this situation, All Might will have to deal with the problem children himself. When the students return after lunch, Shoyuta is pleased to see their shoulders are set with renewed determination, likely due to their conversation with the other UA students. The competition from the other classes will do them some good, then. By the time the festival rolls around, Shoyuta is confident in his students' abilities. They'll do well. He agrees to Hisashi's pleading to join him in the commentator box, mostly because it provides the best vantage point in the stadium with cameras positioned to feed them video of every moment from every angle. Hisashi doesn't tell him that he's expected to provide his own commentary on the events, but Shoyuta often finds Hisashi's remarks lacking any real analytical merit, so he chimes in when necessary. As expected, his students do exceedingly well in the first round's obstacle course, and all 19 of them impressively make the cut to the second round. Todoroki ended in first and Bakugo in second, though they both wasted an illogical amount of time posturing and antagonizing each other in the minefield. They were interrupted only by Izuku as he ran over the mines on cork-made platforms, closing in on the finish line rapidly. Still, having 3 of his students over the finish line first, and almost half of the second round be consisted of his class, fills Shoyuta with a strong sense of pride. Hitoshi, for his part, makes it to the second round as well, but only barely. Shoyuta has tried hard the last couple of weeks to convince Hitoshi to focus on his physical conditioning, since the Hero Course kids are on a rigorous training regimen and their abilities were at a level Hitoshi couldn't yet match, but his son didn't take Shuta's advice as seriously as he would have liked. Now, he is over-reliant on his quirk and the others' unawareness of its functionality. While this strategy could have merit in the other rounds, like the one-on-one matches in the third, it was relatively unhelpful in a competition like an obstacle course. He made it, though, and Shoyuta just has to hope that his son's methods are adequate enough for him to prove his potential as a hero student. Luckily, Hitoshi's reliance on his quirk is at least helpful in the second round, when he can easily command other teams to pass over their headbands right before the time runs out, and he guarantees himself a spot in the third round. Several of Shuta's problem children have advanced as well, and Class 1A is the predominant competition in the one-on-ones. Shuta's chest is warm from pride. Then he sees the matchup for the fights, and his chest becomes decidedly less warm. Izuku and Hitsuhei are paired for the first round. Hizashi whistles under his breath, seeing the problem too. Shirakumo vs. Aizawa, take 2. He ignores Shuta's correction that Hitoshi is technically Shinso, not an Aizawa. The relatives of my high school best friends facing off. Who on earth do I root for? Izuku doesn't know Hitoshi's quirk, Shoyuta says plainly. Hizashi winces appropriately in response. This is gonna be bad. It is bad. Shoyuta knows how the match will end before it even begins, when Izuku and Hitoshi step into the ring as Present Mike enthusiastically announces their entrance. Izuku is bouncing on his heels, smiling anxiously, and so eager to show his capabilities as a hero. In contrast, Hitoshi is infuriatingly aloof and brushes off Izuku's excitement with chilly nonchalance. Midnight calls for the match to start. Izuku hops, forming an elevated platform beneath himself. Shoyuta knows his strategy, has seen him practice in the spars against his classmates. In the limited space of the ring, he's creating distance between himself and an unknown quirk, staying out of range as best he can until he can appropriately gauge the best retaliation, and then he will attack from the high ground. When Shoyuta watched him do this during their training, as Izuku was sparring with and aerially dodging an irate Bakugo, he was incredibly proud of the logic in it. Unlike his peers with more offensive quirks, Izuku can use fog most effectively when he finds ways to use it creatively. In most situations, keeping a fair distance away from an opponent until there's an opportunity to strike would be very effective. Unfortunately, it doesn't work well against a quirk like Hitoshi's. Hitoshi says something. He's sneering, but there are no mics close enough to the fight to pick up what he's saying. Whatever it is, though, causes Izuku to freeze in the air above him. Hitoshi says something else. Izuku responds. It's over only seconds after it begins. Smirking, Hitoshi obviously commands Izuku to walk out of bounds, and dispersing the cloud beneath himself, Izuku does as he was asked. Midnight calls the round. There's a moment of silence, during which Hitoshi must release Izuku from his quirk, because his blank expression suddenly shudders as he stares at the painted boundary behind himself, stunned. The crowd, obviously displeased by such a short and anticlimactic match, begins to boo, and Hitoshi takes a grandiose bow like a circus ringleader after a show. Hizashi feebly tries to assure the crowd that, despite appearances, the match was not forfeited and was won due to a quirk, but they continue to shout their displeasure. Red-faced and teary-eyed, Izuku hurriedly walks back into the hallway he came out from. He's really not like him at all, Hizashi murmurs under his breath, once the audience has settled and he's turned his microphone back off. Shoyuta only barely hears him. What do you mean? Izuku. He doesn't act much like how I remember Oboro. He's quieter, more sensitive and skittish, don't you think? It's not like they grew up together, Shoyuta says, perhaps a little callously, but he's slowly realizing that Hisashi is right. They have their similarities, sure, with their physical appearance being the most notable and that smile. Izuku is just as caring as Oboro, just as selfless and willing to risk his well-being to help others. But their overall demeanor is drastically different. Oboro had always been so confident in himself, had always been so optimistic, had always been smiling. To see that bright, unabashed smile in Izuku, though, it often needed to be coaxed from him. Thinking about it now, Shoyuta thinks he's only seen his confidence really seen it. When Izuku was around Bakugo, or in battle. When he was fully relaxed, around what may be the one person he truly trusts, or when he was so deep in the energy of a fight that he paid his anxiety no attention. Oboro was bold and confident. Izuku is nervous and unsure. Remembering Izuku's expression after his defeat, how he appeared so defeated, so hopeless, Shoyuta knows that he would take this harder than Oboro ever would have. Shuta's phone pings. A message from Nizu, simply reading a number for a private room in the arena. Its meaning is clear. Thank God for the rat and his multitude of cameras. When he stands, Hisashi startles. Hey, where you going? You're gonna miss your students' matches. Maybe you really are a bad teacher after all, Eraserhead. Another student requires my attention, Shoyuta says, and immediately understanding, Hisashi waves him off. As always, Nizu's information is reliable. When Shoyuta reaches the room bearing the same number from the message, he already knows something is wrong by the thin trails of mist leaking under the doorframe. He knocks lightly. Shirakumo? It's Aizawa. There is no verbal response, but Shoyuta hears a shuddering intake of breath. I'm going to come in, he announces and opens the door slowly. A layer of fog coats the floor of the small room, liking at Shuta's calves, and he can feel the chill of it even through the fabric of his jumpsuit. Izuku sits, up to his chin in the mist, with his back against the far wall and knees curled to his chest. Fog trickles from between his shut eyelids like gaseous tears, falling into the rolling sea below. Sorry, he whimpers as Shoyuta steps closer and crouches across from him, sinking deeper into the cool fog until it climbs to his chest. Don't apologize. Just focus on calming yourself down and getting control of your quirk for now. Izuku flinches, so subtly that Shoyuta almost misses it, but he follows Shuta's exaggerated breathing pattern until it becomes more steady. Got a better grip on yourself, problem child? Nodding, Izuku breathes deeply, and the sea of fog recedes until it's nothing more than a small puddle pooling around Izuku's hunched form. There you go. Sorry, sensei. Still no need to apologize, but I want to talk about what that was. I don't want you losing control of yourself again, though, so we're just going to have a rational conversation, all right? Izuku nods, and his eyes are focused, his breathing is even, so Shoyuta forges ahead. What caused that? I lost, Izuku explained, simply, as if that logically warranted such an extreme loss of emotional control that he also lost control of his quirk. Lots of kids lost today, but I haven't found them breaking down in a dark room. Again, Izuku winces, and Shoyuta hastily rephrases. I don't mean that to say that you're weaker than them, problem child, or anything like that. I mean that there is clearly something else bothering you, something deeper, and I would like to know what that is. Izuku buries his face in his knees, breathing heavier but still steady enough that Shoyuta doesn't interfere. He just waits. Finally, Izuku exhales loudly and whimpers, I've tried so hard, for so long, to be a hero and I lost. Shoyuta is about to interrupt again, because this sounds like the same justification as before, but Izuku continues, I didn't just lose. To us. It was awful. I thought this would be my chance to show that I can be strong, I can fight, I can be strong like my brother was, but I didn't even get the chance. A quirk like that can take over someone's mind like that, it's... Instinctively, Shoyuta braces himself for the inevitable quirk bias, for the word villainous to be spat from Izuku's mouth. Instead, it's amazing. But I couldn't do anything. He was right. I'm so weak. I couldn't even try to fight, try to win, and I just walked out of the ring. I forfeited. There were people rooting for me today. Those people that believed in me, even when everyone else. I let those people down today. I disappointed them. I'm always disappointing people, I'm never good enough, and this is just the proof that my mom was right, I can't dash. Izuku's breath stutters as he trips over his words, and Shoyuta snaps his fingers near his ear sharply to recenter his attention. Kid, breathe with me again. Recollect your thoughts. When you're calm, you can continue. I'm listening. The next minute passes in relative silence, only the sound of slowing breaths filling the space. I'm sorry. Not for being upset, he adds hastily, when Shoyuta is obviously about to interrupt irritably. I'm sorry I disappointed you, sensei. I really did try. Shoyuta sighs. What a problem, child. You didn't disappoint me. None of my students did, and especially not you. I've seen the effort you put into your training, and I know it'll be incredibly beneficial for you in the future, even if you didn't get a chance to use it during the sports festival. Your first round was an unfortunate matchup, and you lost. It happens. Do you consider your peers who have also been eliminated to be disappointments? Izuku shakes his head. Hold yourself to the same standards, kid. No one's disappointed in you. Again, they sit together in silence. Rationally, Shuta's job has been done, and he should return to spectating the rest of the festival, but he doesn't want to break the quiet bubble of trust he and Izuku exist in. Softly, as if he too is afraid to break the lull, Izuku says, Oboro placed in both of his sports festivals. When it's clear he's waiting for a response, Shoyuta answers with his voice faintly tinged with emotion. I know. I beat him our first year. Izuku laughs hesitantly. Has he always been so hesitant, and Shuta's not noticed? My whole life, people have compared me to him. My mom can't even look at me without seeing my brother, but I'm not him. I'm smaller. I'm weaker. My quirk is just a worse version of his. But ever since I was a kid, I've always wanted to be a hero, be the hero he didn't get the chance to be. I never met him, at least not when I was old enough to remember, but my mom. Everyone used to tell me stories, and he sounded like everything I wanted to be. Confident, strong, brave. Everything I'm not. Izuku's eyes clench shut as he inhales deeply, like he's resetting his lungs' rhythm. Shoyuta ignores the ache that's growing in his chest because that's what he's been doing all along, isn't it? Comparing Izuku to the ghost of his brother, and he waits. You were his friend. I've seen you in the old photo albums my parents had, you and present Mike. You know he was great. I'll never be him, but I wanted to prove that I could be just as good as he was. Or at least close. And I know Oboro didn't die because he was weak. I know that. But when those villains attacked us, I felt so weak and so helpless, like I could die just like he did. Then out there today when Shinso said, I felt so helpless again. I was still too weak to do anything. I thought if I could place in the sports festival like Oboro did, then my mom would. I thought I could prove that I'm strong enough to do this. That I could be brave and I could win. That I could be just enough. Enough to be a hero. And I lost. Izuku is done now, Shoyuta thinks, but he gives him a moment to breathe. Izuku, he calls, when the silence has stretched thin between them. I feel I owe you an apology. Oboro was a very dear friend of mine, and I admit that you remind me of him. But you're not him, and you don't deserve to be compared to someone you are not. You're your own person, Izuku. You have your own unique merits and obstacles, and these don't inherently make you a worse version of your brother. I'm sorry that I, or anyone else, have made you feel differently. You have nothing to prove. Not to me or anyone else, including yourself. You're a child who has recently experienced something traumatic. Even pro-heroes have emotions after something like that, and we all feel a little weak and helpless sometimes. It's nothing to be ashamed of, but it's necessary to overcome if you want to be a successful hero. Today you lost a fight. Nothing more than that. Don't assign unnecessary meaning to things, problem child. Tomorrow, you'll get up and try again. Learn from this and you won't lose again. You might not feel like it, but you did good today. I'm certain that the people supporting you are proud of you. Wiping the gaseous tears from his eyes, Izuku chuckles weakly. You were one of those people, sensei. Briefly, Shoyuta squeezes his shoulder. Don't make a habit of fishing for compliments, brat, but I am proud of you. Now, if you're done here, go back to your class. I have other students to watch in this festival, after all, and I can't be playing favorites. He quickly lifts the corners of his lips in the approximation of a smile, so Izuku knows he's teasing. Thank you, sensei. When Izuku disappears down the hallway, returning to his peers, Shoyuta sighs. Please, stop thanking me, kid. In the second round, the match between Hitoshi and Todoroki is a near-exact replica of Izuku's. The crowd jeers once again, upset at the lack of excitement, but both of the kids take it in stride. Hitoshi blows exaggerated kisses to the crowd. Shoyuta decides he's been spending too much time with Hizashi and Todoroki, although seeming surprised initially, leaves the arena with a neutral expression on his face. Shoyuta does see, though, from his vantage point across the arena, Izuku stand hastily from his set among his classmates and disappear into the hallways of the arena once again. He hopes he is only going to commiserate with Todoroki. Nizu will send another text if he has to deal with any more issues, anyway. Still, he finds himself relaxing when both Izuku and Todoroki return to their seats during the match between Tokoyami and Mina. Surprising, possibly, that the typically standoffish Todoroki elects to sit so closely to Izuku on the bench, their heads bowed together in seemingly intense conversation, but shared loss can oftentimes forge friendships. Shoyuta frankly doesn't have the energy to deal with any other problems today if he can help it, so he simply elects to ignore it for now. The semifinals consist of Bakugo against Tokoyami, a matchup that heavily favors Bakugo, and Hitoshi against Ida. Shoyuta half expects this match to be the one to finally show Hitoshi that he can't be so dependent on his quirk alone. Izuku is friendly with Ida, friendly enough that they've been chatting amicably with each other in the space between matches, so he's had sufficient opportunity to inform his friend of the verbal activation of Hitoshi's quirk and give Ida the advantage. Once an enemy knows how brainwashing functions, it's easy to avoid, and Hitoshi hasn't trained enough in physical combat to challenge Ida without it. Shoyuta is almost disappointed that this apparently isn't the case. Midnight begins the match, and when Hitoshi speaks, Ida answers without hesitation. Shoyuta is a bit concerned that all of his students don't seem to be wary of the possibility of verbal quirks. Maybe he'll introduce that into his curriculum this year. Unsurprisingly, this fight ends the same way as the others, with Hitoshi's opponent walking out of the ring seemingly of their own accord. Once again, the crowd is very disappointed. Shoyuta, Hizashi whines. Why is your kid's quirk so boring? Glaring, Shoyuta turns on his mic. Might as well announce this across the stadium. The capability to end a fight non-violently is often underappreciated in the hero world. Shinso is performing to the best of his abilities and has subdued his opponents without injury. Show better respect to him and his opponents who have worked hard to be here today. When Shoyuta turns the mic back off, and the crowd quiets, Hizashi still pouts. Doesn't make for good television though. Shut up, Hizashi. His phone pings, another text from Nizu, and Shoyuta wonders which of his students is causing problems now. He expects a room number, or some other indication that there is an issue he needs to resolve. Instead, the message reads, Ida Tenya will not be participating in the awards ceremony. His absence has been excused due to family emergency. Family emergency? Tensei? Has he lost another of his friends? Shoyuta doesn't think about it. Bakugo wins his fight against Tokoyami easily, the light emitted by his explosions forcing Dark Shadow to retreat and Tokoyami to surrender. This means that Hitoshi will be facing Bakugo, Shura's most aggressive student, in the finals. Hizashi sighs. Bakugo's way too rowdy. All Miniyu's gotta do is insult him and bam, it's all over. Some fight for the finals this year, I guess. Initially, Shoyuta agrees. It's unfortunate, and a little frustrating, that Hitoshi will likely win this whole festival by solely coasting with his quirk and with minimal effort on his part. He's immensely proud of his son, of course. Since Shoyuta adopted him, Hitoshi has wanted nothing more than to be a hero, and his success in the festival will surely guarantee him a transfer into 1A. On the other hand, however, Shura's seen firsthand the effort Hitoshi's opponents, Shura students namely Izuku and Ida had put into their training, and Hitoshi admittedly hadn't worked as hard in recent weeks, declining Shura's numerous offers to assist him in physical training. From that perspective, he understands his students' frustration and disappointment. To be beat entirely by someone who seemingly puts no effort into his fights, when they've pushed themselves to their limits, would feel downright insulting. But then Bakugo and Hitoshi walk out onto the field, and Shoyuta immediately realizes that this win won't be Hitoshi's. He chuckles somewhat vindicatively, and Hisashi looks at him, confused by his sudden change in demeanor. Shura's almost surprised he hasn't noticed, but he only spends a single class PRD a day with 1A. Shoyuta, though, has learned to recognize his students' habits in the last few weeks. With a class of problem children like his own, he's needed to learn these habits of theirs, so that he can catch and reform the ones that might be detrimental to their learning and overall well-being. So when Bakugo stands in the ring across from Hitoshi, Shoyuta immediately notices the abnormality. Bakugo Katsuki is incredibly proud. He does not enjoy wasting time on people or subjects that he views as beneath himself or that he just doesn't care about. As such, Shoyuta has several times caught him disconnecting his cochlear implant in the middle of class, subtly silencing the lectures for himself while still seeming to be paying attention to the untrained eye. Usually, Izuku replaces the magnetic attachment of the CI from behind him, reactivating it and forcing Bakugo to tune back into the lessons. Today, though, Bakugo stands across from Hitoshi with the external half of his implant completely absent, and there is nothing Hitoshi can do, short of becoming as loud as a jet engine, to be heard by his opponent. No matter what he says, Bakugo will not respond. Hitoshi is clearly unaware of this. When Midnight begins the match with a dramatic wave, he smirks and calls something out, clearly expecting an enraged response. Bakugo, though, simply launches himself forward with a massive explosion and a yell loud enough for Shoyuta to hear in the announcer booth. The thing about Hitoshi's quirk is that its requirements of activation are specific. It's not as simple as Hitoshi saying something and getting any sort of noise in response. The target has to truly understand Hitoshi's words and process them, and they must actively verbalize an actual reply to the comment. Bakugo's violent shout of "Die!" after Hitoshi's taunt does not meet these requirements. Surprised by his inability to brainwash him, Hitoshi futilely stumbles backwards, but it's not enough to dodge Bakugo's fiery palms. He takes a hit directly to the chest, and Shoyuta winces in sympathy, having been on the end of one of those explosions once himself during a sparring session. Bakugo had bragged about landing a blow on him for days afterwards. Shoyuta knows that the damage is restrained, less explosive than his maximum force, and is nothing that can't easily be healed by Recovery Girl, but the hit must sting regardless. The hit forces Hitoshi to the edge of the ring, only barely within bounds, but Bakugo is chest to chest with him now, and he has no hope of recovery. Not against one of his most combatively component students. Bakugo spits something unheard over Hisashi's frantic yelling over the stadium speakers. Then he kicks Hitoshi in the chest, sending him flying out of the ring. As Hitoshi lies sprawled across the ground, the crowd jeering, Bakugo turns and stalks away without a backwards glance. After these short weeks, Shoyuta knows him well enough to tell that he is unsatisfied despite the victory. An hour later, after an awkward awards ceremony in which a third-place student was absent, second place kept muttering snide remarks under his breath, and first place glared into empty space until finally snapping at the student just below him. Shoyuta finally walks out of the stadium, Hitoshi by his side with a silver medal sitting proudly around his neck. He doesn't seem happy about it, though, and his feet are dragging with every step. Thought you'd be happier. Bakugo, Hitoshi growls as if that serves as sufficient explanation. Admittedly, it somewhat does. What did you say to each other on the podium? The mics didn't pick you up, and whatever he said to you shut you up pretty fast. Hitoshi glowers and says nothing. Outside of the stadium are a few stragglers enjoying the festival's booths and food stalls as it ends. Some of them, seeing the medal on Hitoshi's chest, congratulate him on his win, but Shoyuta sees just as many shake their heads, disappointed by the lack of excitement this festival. Hitoshi ignores both the faint support and silent disapproval, remaining blank-faced as they weave through the event. At least until they pass a soba stall, where Bakugo, Izuku and, somewhat surprisingly, Todoroki sit with two adults. Bakugo's parents if their appearances were anything to go off of. At the sight of them, Hitoshi's subdued demeanor changes to a forced confidence as he straightens his shoulders and lifts his chin. Bakugo glowers haughtily, and Todoroki ducks his head to the side, but Izuku bites his lip contemplatively as he looks between Shoyuta and his son. Then, resolutely he stands and approaches them. Hitoshi tenses as Izuku draws nearer, but Shoyuta knows his student well enough to doubt he would do anything malicious. "Did you enjoy the rest of the festival, problem child?" At the nickname, Hitoshi's eyes whip toward him. He knows as well as Shoyuta that he only verbally refers to kids by designated nicknames when he actually likes them. Although why he's surprised by Shuta's affection for Izuku, he isn't sure. "I had a good time." "Thank you, sensei." Izuku seems to understand his real question, "Are you okay now?" And Shuta's shoulders relax at the confirmation. Turning to face Hitoshi, Izuku's small smile becomes a little dimmer, though it still appears genuine. "Shinso, I just wanted to congratulate you on your success today." "He won't lose to you again, brain freak." Bakugo roars through a mouthful of soba, ignoring the admonishing whack from his mother. "Ignore him. He just wanted to fight me today and didn't get the chance," Izuku explains, glancing at his friend fondly. "Congratulations, Shinso. I hope to see you in 1A with us soon, and I hope we can prove you wrong." "About what you said?" Hitoshi's eyes narrow. He doesn't reply. Taking the hint, Izuku nods respectfully toward Shoyuta and rejoins his group. Bakugo's apparent father ruffles his hair familiarly, and Shoyuta can just overhear his, "Come on, Zuku, let's go back home," as he and Hitoshi walk away. Shoyuta has questions, but he waits until they get home. As soon as they're through the door, Hitoshi heading to the living room, he asks, "What did you say to them?" "During the fights." He shrugs. "Just whatever I thought would get them talking." "Hitoshi, what did you say?" Glaring, Hitoshi collapses into the armchair and rips his medal from his neck to toss it spitefully onto the table. "What does it matter?" "It matters because I saw how they looked at you afterward, and I know you must have said something to make them look that way." "We'll start with Shirakumo. What did you say to him?" "Word for word." "Were you so confident at the USJ? If you're as strong as you're pretending to be now, why couldn't you save your teacher?" Shoyuta blinks. "You used the USJ incident against him." He had figured Hitoshi had said something cruel, but this. "What did you say to Todoroki? Think you're gonna make Daddy proud? Prove you'll be a hero just like him, when you couldn't stop the villains you've already met." "Ida. Only a coward is faced with a group of villains and runs away. How can you be a hero like that?" Stunned, particularly by the blankness of Hitoshi's tone, Shoyuta falls to sit on the couch, cradling his head in his hands. "Hitoshi, why would you?" Hitoshi snorts. "What? The poor little heroes can't take some damage to their egos?" "Hitoshi, you didn't just hurt their pride. I found Izuku having a panic attack after your mash. Severe enough that he lost control of a quirk he's never shown less than expert control over." Briefly, Shoyuta sees Hitoshi wince. He's no stranger to panic attacks himself. Still, the empathy passes quickly, and Hitoshi turns furious eyes toward him. "Wait, so it's Izuku? First names? How special are these kids, huh?" "That's not the point right now. The point is you weaponized a traumatic experience against children. You used it to manipulate them, so you can use your quirk on them. A hero wouldn't do something like that." "What do you mean by that?" "I mean," Shoyuta says, fighting to keep his voice relatively even because he's furious, "but this is still his son, and he's just misguided right now. If this is going to be how you use your quirk, by triggering your classmates, then I will personally make sure you are not transferred to 1A. At this, Hitoshi pales. "You wouldn't do that." "I would." Shoyuta means it too. "If it means protecting my students from being taunted by a traumatic experience, they dash. How can you defend them like that?" Stunned by the volume of the outburst, Shoyuta stops, and Hitoshi continues unbidden. They were there. They let you. They didn't do anything. And you got hurt. You almost died, Dad. Hitoshi's voice trembles, becoming quieter. You almost died. I was so scared. And I know Hisashi said it was a code red, not a black, and I shouldn't have been worried. But you looked so hurt. It was so bad and I thought you were gonna die. And those hero kids. They were there and they just let it happen. Slowly, Shoyuta rises from the couch and pushes Hitoshi gently against one side of the armchair so he can squeeze into the open space beside him. It's a tight fit, but Shura's certain that the line of contact between their bodies is comforting right now. Kid, I'm so sorry to have scared you like that. I'm okay. I'll be okay, although I'm sure you rationally know that, right? It's the irrational part of your brain that's causing problems right now. Hesitantly, Hitoshi nods, and Shoyuta leans further against his side. That's okay. It's okay to still feel overwhelmed by all of that. The USJ was bad, and it could have been worse, and that's scary. But, Hitoshi, you cannot put any blame on those kids. They are just as much victims of that as I was, and they're children. They aren't heroes yet. They had no responsibility to defend a pro-hero in that situation. Yet, despite that, they tried anyway. They what? There are details of what happened that I didn't share with you, because I thought they would only scare you and wouldn't do you any good. Now, though, I think you should know that those kids did not just let it happen, and most of them did everything they could in that situation to keep me and everyone else safe. Specifically, if it weren't for Shirakumo's use of his quirk during critical moments of that fight, there is a high possibility I would have sustained brain trauma or, at the very least, damage to my quirk. Those kids are good kids. Don't blame them for the actions of villains that they tried to protect me from. Hitoshi is silent for a few minutes. Shoyuta sits with him, continuing to lean his weight comfortably against his son's shoulder. Finally, he whispers, I'm sorry. I was scared. I didn't want to lose you, and I really thought I was going to. I know and I understand. But those kids didn't deserve what you said to them. You need to apologize, when you're ready to, and you can't do it again. Understood? Yes. Good. Do you want me to sit with you for a while? Or would you rather be given space right now? Space, please. Nodding, Shoyuta stands from the armchair. He drapes their softest blanket over Hitoshi's shoulders. You made some mistakes today, he tells him, pulling the blanket tighter around him when Hitoshi wilts, but I'm proud of you. I'm glad that we talked tonight, that you finally told me that this has been bothering you, and I hope that you confide in me in the future rather than continue to repress yourself. I love you. I know that. I'm sorry. With one last squeeze to Hitoshi's shoulders, Shoyuta leaves him alone for the night. Naturally, the only open seat in 1A for Hitoshi is directly behind Izuku, who, in turn, is directly behind Bakugo, so all of Shura's problem children are lined up in a convenient row. It would be unwise to leave them all seated together, especially when Bakugo glares at Hitoshi each time he walks past, but he can't subtly change the seating chart, so he'll have to leave it for now. Izuku, at least, acts as a decent buffer between the two, and he's clearly well practiced in wrangling Bakugo when he's in a mood. Shoyuta had fully expected the class's lukewarm response to Hitoshi joining their class, and is pleased that for the most part, the reception has been positive, if a little hesitant. The only students Shoyuta needs to keep an eye on are Bakugo, obviously, Todoroki, who seems wary of Hitoshi but not necessarily malicious, and Ida, whose brother is currently hospitalized, paralyzed, by a villain that calls himself a vigilante. He had brushed off all of his friend's concerns before class, saying he was fine, but Shoyuta could tell from the tension in his shoulders and the blank look in his eyes that he is decidedly not fine. Another friend lost. Not dead, maybe, but lost. Izuku is the only one of the students who appears to share Shura's concerns, eyes glancing toward his friend periodically with thinly veiled concern. He's lost a brother himself. To the class at large, Shoyuta says, you all performed well in the sports festival, some admittedly more than others. Bakugo's chest puffs pridefully, and Hitoshi smirks. Your teachers aren't the only ones that took notice of this. Here are the numbers for internship offers. Usually, these are spread more evenly across the students, but apparently a few of you stood out over the rest. Bakugu Katsuki, 3556. Todoroki Shudo, 3543. Tokoyami Fumikage, 360. Ida Tenya, 301. Kaminari Denki, 272. Yairazu Momo, 108. Shinsu Hitoshi, 74. Kirishima Iger, 68. Yurakochiko, 20. Tsuruhanta, 13. Shirakumo Izuku, 3. I got offers. Izuku wonders to himself absent-mindedly. Bakugu scoffs. Yeah, 3. That's hardly any. Look how many I got. Mina raises a hand. Why did Todoroki get so many? He didn't even make it to the semifinals. Nepotism, Todoroki answers matter-of-factly, only barely loud enough for Shoyuta to hear at the front of the classroom. Izuku clearly must have caught it too, if the disapproving glare cast in his direction as chastisement is any indication. Shouldn't Shinso have gotten more? Izuku asks, once Shudo's bashfully ducked his head down. Rolling his eyes, Hitoshi says, yeah, I should've, but I didn't. Izuku frowns, clearly unhappy by this explanation but unwilling to pester Hitoshi more. Calling the attention back to himself, Shoyuta speaks over their chatter. Internships start next week. To prepare, we'll be having a lesson on your public image as a hero, which I am personally unqualified to teach. The door slams open, and Shoyuta sighs exaggeratedly as Midnight struts into the room. That's where I come in. We'll be choosing codenames today, so look sharp. Let's get these white bards passed out, and we'll get crackin'. She snaps her whips in emphasis as Shoyuta retreats into his sleeping bag to escape the class's enthusiasm. Shoyuta does eventually poke his head out when his students begin announcing their names to the class, even if he doesn't have the right to express his own opinions of them. Eraserhead was chosen by Hizashi, after all, so Shuda's obviously never been too invested in hero names. Although, he feels that even he is allowed to cringe at Bakugu's King Explosion Murder, which is immediately followed up by Hitoshi's Insomnia, both of which are vocally condemned by their classmates. Todoroki and Ida each go with their given names, which is mildly concerning. Shoyuta will need to make sure that these aren't signs of deeper issues that will likely need to be addressed in the future. Izuku presents his hero name last. Immediately, Shoyuta can tell that he'll need to pay close attention to this one by the literally foggy look in the problem child's eyes. Midnight, standing behind Izuku, glances at the white board clutched tightly in his grip and smiles a little forlornly. My brother. Never got the chance to be the hero he should have been, Izuku starts. Oh, Shoyuta understands what's happening. I never met him, but I know he would have been great. I'm not him, I won't ever be him, and that's all right, but I wanted to honor his lost opportunity with my own hero name. Even if Oboro will never be a hero, Loud Cloud still can be. Izuku flips his board. I am the atmospheric hero, Loud Cloud. Oboro years ago. I'll be a bold and confident hero always ready to help. I'm Loud Cloud. The class cheers. Uncertainly, Izuku glances at Shoyuta. Shoyuta nods, and Izuku finally smiles. A real smile. Okay everyone, those of you who have received internship offers need to grab your packets. Even if you have no offers, there are a list of agencies that have agreed to take any UA student. They aren't picky. Make sure you have your agency chosen and your paperwork filled out by tomorrow. Bakugu, here's yours. He passes out the packets to the kids with offers first, taking a quick moment to glance at Izuku's list as he hands it over. He knows he sent an offer of his own, and Eraserhead is subsequently written right in the middle. Below it is, Put Your Hands Up Agency, which is a little funny, since he and Hizashi definitely hadn't coordinated this. The most perplexing name on his list, though, is the first one. Endeavor Agency. Endeavor hadn't even put in an offer for Bakugu, who won the festival and has the type of flashy, powerful quirk Shoyuta would have figured he would favor. Instead, he only put in an offer for his own son, Nepotism. Todoroki's voice reminds him mentally and Izuku, a kid with a non-offensive quirk that really hadn't made any kind of impact in the festival at all. Izuku stares at the list in his hands as if it had personally offended him, twisting in his seat to beckon Todoroki over. Unable to mind his own business, Bakugo leans over the desk between himself and Izuku to read over the paper, and even Hitoshi is not so subtly listening to their conversation. Shoyuta can't really blame him, though, since he's doing the same, but he can internally chastise him for not being as discreet. What the hell, Deku? You got an offer from Endeavor? I guess. Don't accept it, Todoroki suggests. I don't trust it. He's probably mad about what you did at the festival, so he would make it a personal hell. Deku, did you PSS off Endeavor? What the F did you do? He's cacking not so loud. He put out his flames with his fog like a fire extinguisher, Todoroki explains, and Shoyuta struggles not to choke. Hitoshi is less successful at this, apparently, and coughs into his hand to cover his subsequent wheeze of laughter. He was being so mean to you. I couldn't just ignore it. Bakugo cackles. God damn it, Deku. Only you would receive an internship offer out of petty revenge. Izuku drops his head against the desk and Todoroki offers a stiff pat to his shoulder. Choose someone else. Sensei put in an offer for you. Maybe that would be good. At this, Izuku glances up at Shoyuta, who hurriedly moves his gaze away to pretend like he's not paying attention. He has a feeling he's been caught anyway. Yeah. I'll think about it. Izuku does not accept Eraserhead's internship offer. Instead, he puts down the normal hero, Manuel's agency in Hosu. The evening after sending his students off to their respective internships, Hizashi barrels into Shura's apartment. In his hand is a bottle of alcohol. Hizashi, why are you here? Some of us have interns to train in the morning. Hitoshi, being the intern in question, waves from his seat on the couch. We both know neither of you will willingly get out of bed before noon, since you can make your own schedules. Can I hang out with my bestest buddy? I'm dealing with the heartbreak of rejection, you know. Hizashi tries the puppy eyes. Unfortunately, Shoyuta gives in and leads Hizashi into the kitchen to pour their drinks. Is this about Izuku not accepting your internship offer? He knows that's not actually why Hizashi's here, and Hizashi knows it too. He's here because Shoyuta always feels inexplicably wrong after sending his students to internships and work studies. He feels like he's personally sent his kids to their deaths. Hizashi points an accusing finger. Hey, he didn't accept yours either. Yeah, well, that does sting a bit. Especially because Shoyuta doesn't see any logical reasoning for that decision. At least if Izuku had elected to go with Hizashi's agency, Shoyuta would know that he'd be getting a decent amount of training there. But to choose Manuel over either of his teachers seems odd and illogical. He said he didn't want your pity offers. Both Hizashi and Shoyuta turn their heads to Hitoshi, casually sprawled in front of the TV in the living room. He further explains, I overheard him talking to his lordship, the Great Explosion Murder, about it during lunch, but they shut up once I sat down with them. Guess they still don't trust me. It's whack. You sat with Izuku during lunch? Hizashi asks. Izuku knows you're my son. That's most likely why he didn't want to say anything around you if it could be seen as insulting to me. No longer paying attention to his documentary, Hitoshi sputters. He knows. He visited me in the hospital after the USJ while you were asleep, and I didn't lie when he asked who you were. There's no reason to worry about it. If he hasn't mentioned it to any of his friends yet, I doubt that he will. More importantly, why would he think they were pity offers? Beats me. I didn't hear anything else. What I want to know is why you keep calling him Izuku like you know him personally, which I know you don't because you would have made me meet him for a playdate or something way before this. You're always saying I need more friends, whatever that means. It means you're an introverted recluse who will die alone at this rate, Shoyuta jabs. Pot meat kettle. Anyway. Hizashi interrupts before Shoyuta can do something stupid like murder his own son in their living room. We were buds with his brother back when we were at UA. We just call the little dude by his given name to distinguish between them, I think. Suddenly, Hitoshi pales. So, that's where I heard the name Loud Cloud before. He glances at the wall behind the TV, where Shoyuta knows a blurry picture of himself, Hizashi, and Oboro is framed. It's the only picture with Oboro in the apartment, his features indistinct enough that the sight of it doesn't send a pain through Shura's chest. He would have been a great hero, Hisashi says. Both he and Shoyuta take a drink. And his own brother rejected my internship offer. The blasphemy. So, it was a pity offer, then? Hitoshi says, ignoring Hisashi's sputtered denial, 'cause it kinda sounds like you only wanted him because of his brother. It wasn't pity though. Wasn't it? Hisashi turns to him with a look of utter betrayal, but Shoyuta continues, I won't deny that I largely offered Izuku the internship because I wanted to keep an eye on him. Because I didn't want what happened to Oboro to happen to him too, he doesn't say. I've already failed one Shirakumo. I don't want to fail another one. Hisashi understands, but he doesn't wipe the pout from his face. Still hurts that he chose manual over us though, right? Like how random was that? Shoyuta does agree, but Ida Tenya chose manual too. Maybe there's something we don't know that made him so appealing. Something you don't know? Hitoshi lifts an eyebrow. That's suspicious. Again, Shoyuta agrees. He won't let himself worry about it, though. He refuses to mother hen over his students more than he already has. So, he changes the topic. How did the problem children respond to your apologies? Because you better have apologized like I told you to. Blushing, Hitoshi ducks his head so his face is hidden by the arm of the couch. It was fine, he tries, but reluctantly continues when Hisashi and Shoyuta stare at him in silent disapproval. Ida just told me it was okay, and I didn't want to bother him anymore since he's got other things to worry about right now. Todoroki ignored me, I think? I'm not sure. I don't think the dude can make an expression that isn't resting beach face even if he tried, but at least he didn't attack me like Bakugo did. Shoyuta freezes. Bakugo attacked you? Why didn't you say anything? Okay, attack might be an exaggeration, Hitoshi admits disgruntledly. He just kinda glared and exploded a bit, but not really at me, and Shirakumo was there to control him, and Bakugo's his beach, so it was fine. Hisashi chokes. And Shirakumo? Shoyuta prompts, used to ignoring Hitoshi's language. Somehow, Hitoshi burrows further into the couch cushions as he mumbles something incoherently. Hisashi holds a hand to his ear. What was that, mini-show? Yeah. My ears ain't how they used to be. He was so nice. Hitoshi whines, like Izuku's kindness is a personal insult. And understanding too? Like he literally told me he understood, and wouldn't hold it against me. He didn't even give me a chance to actually apologize, and just said it was okay. Who even does that? You mean, who doesn't hold grudges for all eternity? Hisashi clarifies helpfully. Hitoshi points at him. Exactly. Then he invited me to eat lunch with them, even though Bakugo and Todoroki obviously didn't want me there. He's a good kid, Shoyuta mentions offhandedly, and Hitoshi lifts his head to gasp in betrayal. Shoyuta chooses not to point out the blush on his face, but Hisashi might. He'd be a good friend to you if you let him. Shoyuta knows from experience that Shirakumos are good friends for the introverts. Yeah. Hisashi yells. Shuta's not quite fast enough to cancel his quirk. Be his friend. The 3 Dumbaigos of Class A will rise again. The 3 what? Hitoshi asks, bewildered. Hisashi, do you realize that, in this scenario, you and Bakugo fulfill the same role? Of loud, irritating blonde. I take it all back. Chugging what's left of his drink, Shoyuta smirks and let the rowdiness Hitoshi's cackling and Hisashi's denial engulf him. For tonight, he can ignore the impending sense of doom knowing his kids are currently out of his reach, on their own. He can imagine that they'll be fine for the week. His kids were not fine for the week. Shoyuta tries to tell the panic bubbling in his chest that it's not his students' fault that they were interning in the same city that the Nomu attacked, and no one could have predicted that. But then he learns that it wasn't the Nomu that put his kids in the hospital, and he lets the panic return full force. I should apologize, Manuel tells him, quickly following on Shuta's heels as he bustles through the hospital. Shirakumo warned me that he was worried for Ida's mental state, and I promised to keep an eye on him, but well. The Nomu showed up and I lost track of them for a while. And that's when they decided to engage a villain that has killed other heroes on their own? Shoyuta clarifies. Yes, apparently. Finally reaching his idiot student's room, Shoyuta waves Manuel off. I'll take it from here. I'm sure you've already had your turn reprimanding them, so leave them to me. Too good-natured for his own good, Manuel nods and turns back down the hallway. You got it. Take it easy on him though, eh? They recognize their mistakes. No, Shoyuta will not take it easy on them. The world won't do them that service, so neither will he. When Shoyuta opens the door, he expects panic, anger, fear to rise within him at the sight of his students in their hospital beds, whatever condition they may be in. He is not prepared for the relief. His students are wounded. They are not dead. All three of them, Ida, Todoroki, Izuku, are awake and lucid enough to pale at the sight of Shoyuta. Standing furiously in the doorway. They have the awareness to feel guilty then. Sensei. Izuku stutters, shrinking under Shuta's glower. What are you doing here? You thought your homeroom teacher wouldn't be notified of any incidents that occurred during your internships? Particularly when they are caused by your own reckless behavior. No immediate answer comes. How else would the three of you receive proper punishment? The police may have been lenient, but I will not be the same way. Ida straightens to sit tall in his hospital bed. Aizawa-sensei, please. I humbly ask that you recognize the fault as my own. Todoroki and Shirakumo were involved due to my own foolish actions. If anyone is to be punished, please let it be only me. I take full responsibility. Narrowing his eyes, Shoyuta asks, even if that results in your expulsion? Ida turns red, but before he can say anything, Izuku stumbles out of his bed, grabs Shoyuta by the wrist, and tugs him into the hallway. Sensei, I need to talk to you about something very important. It's very urgent. Shoyuta, mostly confused and a little curious, allows this to happen. Should you be out of bed, problem child? Shoyuta knows he shouldn't be. He'd gotten a rundown from the nurses on his student's condition. Todoroki had gotten out of the ordeal relatively unscathed, with only nicks and bruises. Ida's shoulder had been injured, but his arm was still functional with slight loss of dexterity in his fingers. Izuku, on the other hand, had taken the brunt of the injuries. Quirk exhaustion from the fight and the patrol leading up to it. A laceration from Stain's blade crossing his chest from his left shoulder to his belly button. Then, deep puncture marks in his back from the Nomu that had attempted to carry Izuku away in its claws. Leaning against the wall for support, Izuku smiles sheepishly. Probably not. But the sooner you listen to me, the sooner I can put the 4 back in. This DMN kid. Get to it then. Izuku's confidence deflates, like he never expected to get this far. Please don't expel Ida? That's all you got? No, He trails off, collecting himself. He made a mistake. He knows that now. He realized that his actions for revenge would have never actually solved anything and only put more people in danger. The lesson has been learned, so there's no reason to punish him further. You think I should allow someone that lets emotions dictate their actions and cloud their judgment, become a hero? But that's what I'm saying. Izuku argues, standing straighter. He cows only slightly at Shuta's blank expression, but quiets his voice into something more rational. You're right that Ida let his anger and need for revenge guide his decisions. But since he's just a kid. His brother that he looked up to was nearly killed, paralyzed for life. Of course he'd be emotional about something like that, right? I really don't think he'd do it again. His doing it once is enough. Wouldn't you have done the same if the person who killed Oboro were still out there? Shoyuta stills, and Izuku claps his hands over his mouth, as if he hadn't meant to say that. Excuse me? I don't mean you would do that now. Izuku waves his hands in denial, but the motion throws him off balance so he has to lean back against the wall. Well, maybe you would, but I'm just saying that you care. I don't think you could be a hero if you didn't. That's why you're so hard on us, because you don't want to see us hurt. Shoyuta doesn't want to see them dead. So, you have to understand why Ida did that, and why Todoroki and I couldn't just leave him alone in that alley. I think you would have done the same, maybe? If you were us. Would you have? Shoyuta doesn't know. In high school he was too hesitant, cowardly, too unsure of his own worth as a hero. He might not have had the courage to help his friends in a situation like that, with the odds stacked so high against them. But Hisashi would've. Oboro would've. And they were always better than Shoyuta could ever hope to be. To Izuku, Shoyuta says, passion is no excuse to ignore logic. With all due respect, sensei, isn't that something you learn from experience? Ida's had that experience now. Glaring, Shoyuta throws open the door to the hospital room, ignoring Todoroki leaning against the closest wall, obviously eavesdropping. I've listened to what you have to say. Back in your bed, problem child, he demands. Knowing that the discussion was over, Izuku shuffles into the room. Once he and Todoroki are resettled, Shoyuta turns to Ida. If you ever do something so illogical again, I will expel you without hesitation. Consider yourself lucky this time. I will see all three of you in class next Monday, and your injuries will not exempt you from training, so recover well. Do not discuss this experience with any of your classmates. I don't want them getting any ideas. Ida gapes in shock, and Shoyuta turns to leave, glancing at Izuku over his shoulder. I will send a nurse in to replace your four. He ignores the chorus of, "Thank you, sensei," as the door closes behind him. Honestly, he should have expelled all three of them. It would have been less of a headache that way. But deep down, though he doesn't want to admit it, he knows Izuku is right. Good heroes care, and his students are just kids who haven't had the time or experienced enough tragedy to learn how to handle their emotions logically. For Shoyuta, it had always been the opposite. Always a logical thinker, it was Oboro that taught him how to care enough to be a hero. He needs to talk to Nizu. If his students insist on getting into trouble like this, the dorms might need to be implemented at UA sooner than planned, if only so Shoyuta can keep an eye on them. Especially if the league planned the Nomu attack like Shoyuta suspects, targeting his students for who knows what reason. As Shoyuta passes the reception area of the hospital, he pauses at the sight of familiar spiky blonde hair. It takes a second for him to realize that he isn't looking at Bakugo. Or at least not Bakugo Katsuki. The woman from the sports festival Bakugo Mitsuki, he concludes, is standing across the desk from the receptionist, laughing boisterously. Wow. You people sure take security seriously around here, huh? The receptionist smiles diplomatically and passes a plastic card to Ms. Bakugo. Sorry about the hassle. Only family members are allowed to visit patients in the hero ward, for security reasons, and we're especially careful when it comes to minors. We just needed to verify that you're Shirakumo's legal guardian, but it looks like everything checks out. Hey, no skin off my back. I'd rather know my kid is being taken care of, even if I gotta do the extra paperwork. Her eyes, red like her son's, catch Shoyuta from where he stands in the ward's entryway, and she grins, diverting her attention from the receptionist. Hey, you're the brat's teacher, right? I never did get the chance to thank you for looking out for those kids. I'd say that I hope they haven't been too much trouble, but well, she gestures at the hospital waiting room, those boys are definitely a handful, though I'm sure you're very aware of this by now. The way she speaks of Izuku and Katsuki, all fond exasperation, Shoyuta can tell that she genuinely cares for the both of them. Even if Izuku isn't hers by blood, he's still hers. What happened to Inko? Please tell your children to refrain from any more incidents, Shoyuta requests of Ms. Bakugo, and she cackles. I'd rather not see them in a hospital room until at least next year, if possible. I can do my best, but those boys will likely be getting into trouble no matter what we do. Her sharp smile softens suddenly as she pauses in front of Shoyuta, who is still partially blocking the doors leading further into the hospital. Honestly, thanks for keeping an eye on my kids. They're good boys, even if their passion makes them a little reckless sometimes. You're good for 'em, I can tell. Katsuki's finally got something to focus all his determination into productively, and Izuku. Well, that boy's had a lot of important people shoot him down, but from how he talks about you, I know there's someone else out there supporting him now. Thanks for that. They'd better be worth the effort, Shoyuta says, but he knows they will be. Ms. Bakugo laughs. I'll tell him you said that. I'd better go check on Izuku before he finds some way to start trouble from a hospital bed. Thanks for all your hard work, Aizawa. She's still chuckling as she shoves past him and disappears down the hallway. He lets her go, even if the conversation left him with more questions unanswered about the Shirakumo family. What happened to Inko? For now, he has other things to worry about. He needs to speak with Nizu. As usual, UA is empty when he arrives that evening. Even after hours, students are usually milling about in the labs and training rooms, but with internships underway, the halls are desolate. Which is why he logically assumes that Nizu's office will be empty as well. Unfortunately, he is incorrect. Of all possible people, Yagi is sat across from Nizu, sharing a cup of tea. It's oolong, so whatever they had been discussing, it must have been important. Shuda's clearly interrupting, but he's certain that Nizu would have seen him coming long before he burst into his office, with all the cameras around the school. If his presence were unwanted, Shoyuda would not have been allowed in, he's sure. Confirming his suspicions, Nizu gestures to the free armchair next to Yagi. Ah, Aizawa, welcome. We were just discussing something, but your opinion would actually be quite valued on the matter, so please do sit. Yagi shifts uncomfortably, so Shoyuda gladly takes a seat, if only to watch the great All Might squirm. I'm not sure if Yagi, I do think it's vital to hear Aizawa's own thoughts on this, especially considering that it concerns one of his students. Although, Nizu turns to Shoyuda, gesturing with the paw not holding his tea, I'm sure you're here for your own reasons? We can start with those if you wish. I want the dorms to be implemented as soon as possible, Shoyuda states plainly. Nizu hums. I assume this has to do with the incident in Hosu? It does. I don't think it was a coincidence that the Nomu were there, especially when one targeted Shirakumo and attempted to carry him away somewhere. I can only assume the League wanted something to do with my students, or even with Shirakumo specifically. Clearing his throat, Yagi asks, is there any reason that they would be interested in Shirakumo? His interference during the USJ attack might have brought their attention to him, but otherwise I don't know. Which is why, for now, it's more logical to assume that the League is targeting the students in general, likely due to their association with All Might. I do agree with you, Aizawa, Nizu says. To best ensure the students' safety, it would be rational to house them here on campus, where there are pro-heroes to defend them. Because of this, I have already requested that Cementos work overtime on completing the dormitory buildings, and he should be finished before the end of the semester. I suggest we use these next few weeks to explain the situation to the students and deal with any inevitable backlash from the parents at our decision. I can imagine that many of them will not be happy about this, but it is the best way to protect the students, so it should not be too much of an issue. Is that amenable to you, Aizawa? They'd be able to move in after the break? He confirms. Correct. And during the break, the students should all be attending the training camp, so there should be no security risks there. Good. I'll inform my class when they return from internships. Nizu nods, satisfied, and pours another cup of tea. Shoyuda hadn't requested one, but he accepts nonetheless. Now that that's out of the way, Yagi, would you like to explain your proposition to Shoyuda? I really do think he should have some input. Hesitantly, Yagi scratches the back of his neck. Nizu, are you positive that Spit it out, Yagi. Now that I know there's something going on, I won't leave it alone anyway. Yagi sighs. Please, listen to everything I have to say before you tell me it's a bad idea, he begins, and Shoyuda straightens in his seat, setting the teacup on the desk in front of him. He has a feeling that he won't want anything fragile in his hands for this. There's a lot to explain, and a lot of it won't make sense at first, so just hear me out. Ignoring the rapid heartbeat behind his ribs, Shoyuda waves him on impatiently. I would like to ask young Shirakumo to inherit my quirk. Shoyuda had fully intended to be present for All Might's conversation with Izuku. Even if All Might tried to be sneaky about it, he'd been prepared to eavesdrop on it at the very least. Unfortunately, All Might must have been aware of Shuda's one weakness. Under no possible circumstances would he willingly arrive to the school more than 10 minutes early on a Monday. As soon as he walks into the classroom, Hitoshi on his heels, and spies Bakugu sitting at his desk with no Izuku in sight, Shoyuda knows that he's lost. When Izuku stumbles into class 2 minutes before the first bell, a dazed and conflicted expression on his face. His suspicions are only confirmed. All Might had already asked him. Shoyuta throws out a hand, stopping Izuku before he can make it to his desk. If you need to talk, problem child, I'm here. Frowning and still a little glassy-eyed, Izuku nods. When he sits in his desk, Bakugo spins on him, hissing something under his breath, but Izuku just shakes his head and waves him away. Later, Kaken. I'll tell you later. Throughout the lesson, Shoyuta can tell that Izuku isn't paying attention, but he really can't be blamed for that. After all, the child had just been asked if he would bear the burden of accepting one of the strongest quirks in existence, and by extension, accept the responsibility of becoming one of the strongest heroes. Shoyuta can forgive him for zoning out halfway through his lessons. During lunch, Izuku comes to his desk. Do you know? If this is about All Might, then yes, I do know. And I know what he has offered you. You can speak to me freely without breaking anyone's trust. Nodding absent-mindedly, Izuku glances around the classroom, eyes pausing on each of his classmates. Can we talk after class, sensei? Shoyuta is relieved. He's relieved that the problem child is asking for advice. He's relieved that he trusts Shoyuta enough to come to him about this. And he's relieved that he seemingly hasn't rushed anything and already accepted All Might's offer. Of course, we can discuss this in one of the school's private rooms, if that would put you more at ease. Yes, please. I just don't know dash. We'll talk about it after class, Shoyuta reminds him. Don't worry yourself about it now. Izuku inhales deeply and lets the tension drain from his shoulders. Yes, sensei. He returns to his circle of friends, Bakugo and Todoroki whispering their questions to him curiously, while Hitoshi stares at Shoyuta over Izuku's head. Shoyuta shakes his head at the questioning gaze. This isn't his to share. By the end of the day, Izuku's anxiety has visibly returned as he picks at the cuticles of his fingernails. Bakugo tries to drag him out the door, as is their usual routine, but Izuku digs his heels into the floor, shaking his head. Sorry, Kaken. I need to talk to Sensei about something. Go home without me. Bakugo narrows his eyes. Is this about whatever the F All Might had to talk to you about this morning? Yeah. What? Is it some kind of secret? When Izuku doesn't respond, Bakugo snarls and pops a small explosion toward the ground. I thought we didn't keep secrets, nerd. We don't, Izuku agrees easily. He makes eye contact with Shoyuta as he says, I'll tell you everything later tonight, I promise. I just need to figure some things out on my own first. It's not a question. He isn't asking for permission to tell Bakugo what exactly All Might is offering to him. It's a promise that he will. Shoyuta nods anyway. Fine, Deku, Bakugo spits, turning to stalk out of the classroom. I'll see you at home. Now, it's just Shoyuta, Izuku, and Hitoshi who stands awkwardly beside his own desk. You can wait for me here or you can walk home without me, Shoyuta tells him. I just need to discuss some things with the problem child. Hitoshi shuffles on his feet, rubbing the back of his neck. I was hoping to talk to Shirakumo. Really fast, I promise. Izuku takes a step closer to Shoyuta, smiling shakily. Sorry, Shinso, can we talk tomorrow? I don't want to keep Sensei waiting. It's fine, Shoyuta says, falling for Hitoshi's pleading look way too easily. He isn't quite sure what his son wants, but he'll let it play out, even if it means Izuku sends him a panicked glance of betrayal. See, he doesn't mind. Shinso gestures for Shoyuta to go outside. He wants to talk to Izuku in private. Interesting. Shoyuta obliges but lurks just outside the doorway to listen indiscreetly. Listen, Shirakumo, Are you okay? Am I okay? My dad told me what happened with the hero killer. He said you were injured, and I know you're not supposed to talk about it, but I wanted to make sure you were okay. The pause. Izuku is clearly confused. I'm fine. I appreciate you asking. Okay, good. I'm glad you're okay. Another pause, this one more awkward, like Hitoshi is gearing himself up to say something. I know I already apologized for Dash. Oh, Shinso, I promise I'm not mad. It's okay. Really? No, I don't think it is, Hitoshi snaps. From behind the door, Shoyuta mentally urges his son to slow down, take a breath. Don't be so easily frustrated. Sorry, I shouldn't have snapped like that. It's fine. But it's not. Hitoshi's tone is quieter now, more plaintive than frustrated, like he's begging Izuku to understand. You're really kind, Shirakumo. I envy that about you, a little bit, just how forgiving and nice you are. But you should be a little mad at me. I said those things. I said very cruel things to you, and I wanted them to hurt you when I said them. I don't now, obviously, but that doesn't matter. It really wasn't cool of me. And I wanted to make sure that you know that it wasn't cool of me. Of course I know that, Izuku murmurs, gently. Shoyuta is so impressed by this boy's patience, able to listen to Hitoshi's apology even when he already has so much on his own shoulders. What you said, it really did hurt me. Like a lot. But it hurt me because those were things I already thought about myself. I thought I was weak and not good enough to be a hero, especially if I wasn't good enough to save your dad. You didn't say anything that I didn't already think was true. That doesn't mean it was okay. You're right, it doesn't. But it also wasn't the worst thing someone said about me, or even to me. And it's also not the worst thing I've ever forgiven. What I was trying to say is, I shouldn't be bothered by others' opinion of me, right? That's what I try to tell myself, at least. So when someone says something hurtful, I should do my best to just let it go. And I also know that people say hurtful things when they're hurting. I've been on the other end of it before, too. Your dad almost died, Shinso, and you wanted someone to blame. Me and the others, we were just that someone. I don't think it was okay to try to hurt us like that, but I understand why you did it, and I forgive you for it. I promise. God, you're so nice, Hitoshi groans. Why can't you be a little mean about it? I totally deserve it. Izuku chuckles weakly. Kaken will be mean enough for me. He and Todoroki will be harder to earn the forgiveness of, so focus on them instead. Also, if you really want to make it up to me, please don't mention Todoroki's father to him again. I can't really say why. But please don't. I can do that, Hitoshi agrees quickly, obviously eager to make up for his mistake in any way possible. For what it's worth, I don't think that what I said was true. Definitely not anymore, Annie. You're really strong and really brave. Oh, thanks, Shinso. I'll remember that. And I do appreciate the second apology, even if it wasn't necessary. We're cool then. Of course we are. Please, don't worry about it. Can you let my dad know that I'll just wait for him here? Assuming he hasn't been listening to this whole conversation. Shoyuta steps away from the door, leaning against the wall opposite the classroom. They have no evidence that he's been eavesdropping. Yet when Izuku steps out from the classroom, he smiles shakily, and Shoyuta knows that he's at least suspicious. Izuku doesn't say anything about it, following behind Shoyuta as he leads him to the private conference room, but he also doesn't tell Shoyuta that Shinso will wait for him either, so he must assume that Shoyuta was listening. A correct assumption, but still disappointing to be so well known by his son and student. Come on, Shirakumo, Shoyuta urges, swinging open the door to a private room and gesturing to one of the empty chairs. Let's talk. You really don't have to call me that if you don't want to. Confused, Shoyuta turns to him. Call you what? Your name. I think, well, I can tell it kind of hurts you. To call me that? I mean, I figured that's why you called me problem child so often. And your face kind of scrunches up whenever you call me by my last name, so it's probably because I remind you of Oboro, which is understandable. I don't mind if you don't call me by name, sensei. Has Shoyuta been doing that? This whole time? He knows that the name is hard to say out loud, he can taste it like acid on his tongue and he can't bring himself to even think the name mentally, but he never thought that it was obvious enough for Izuku to pick up on. I'm sorry. I know you said that you don't like being compared to your brother. Izuku shakes his head. No, it's okay really. I'm used to reminding people of Oboro anyway, so it's not a big deal. Also, when you do it, I don't think it's because I really remind you of him. It's more the name itself that you associate with him, so it's really okay. Well, I can't just call you problem child forever. I don't really mind it, honestly. I just don't. I don't want you to associate me with any negative feelings, sensei, and if it hurts you every time you call me by name then. Shoyuta hums. He doesn't think he'll ever be able to fully ignore the familial connection between Izuku and Oboro. They're just two alike in ways that matter. But even still, he can recognize that Izuku is his own person. Shirakumo, he says, forcing the name to roll from his tongue without the familiar prick of poison it usually brings. I refuse to allow the death of your brother to tarnish my image of you. I'm much too stubborn to let something like unrelated emotions affect my relationship with my students, after all, even when that emotion is the grief of a loved one. Had he loved Oboro? Best not to think about that right now. I already told you that your brother was very important to me, and that you remind me of him, but I also told you that you are your own person, and I have formed an opinion of you that is unbiased by your relationship and association to Oboro. Do you trust me in that, Shirakumo? Izuku smiles. It is just as stunning as Oboro's smile, but it's Izuku's smile. Shoyuta lets the warmth of that grin wash over him as Izuku nods. I trust you, sensei. Thank you. How many people had never extended Izuku this same courtesy? How many people looked at him and only saw the ghost of his brother? How many people refused to see the bright light of the boy beneath? But now, we aren't here to discuss something as annoying as emotions, are we? Izuku's demeanor changes, the smile dimming and his shoulders curling inward. No, we're not. All Might told you about. He waves his hands. About One for All, and how he wants you to inherit it. I don't know what to do. On the one hand, this is a huge honor. I can't believe All Might would choose me as his successor to inherit a quirk as amazing as his. It's amazing. But how can I possibly live up to that kind of expectation? I'm nobody. Fog is nothing like One for All. Why would he think I could possibly handle that kind of dash? Shirakumo, you're rambling. Take a breath while I dissuade some of your doubts. Izuku inhales sharply, and Shoyuta uses the lull as a chance to continue. Firstly, your implication that you being a nobody, as you put it, is a flaw in your capability to wield One for All, is illogical. Consider the fact that you are a nobody solely because you are a student that is still learning to become a hero. By this reasoning, anybody that All Might would have chosen to be a successor would have been a nobody, since young students have the best potential to learn how to handle a new quirk, and that's part of the criteria he is looking for. Not only that, but unlike most other students, you have already proven yourself capable of handling yourself adequately when faced in a high-stakes situation, like the USJ attack. Next is your concern that Fog will not be compatible with One for All. Admittedly, I have concerns about this as well, but I believe it can actually prove to be beneficial with the right training. As you use it now, Fog is defensively oriented, and you use it primarily to shield yourself and others from attacks or to increase your own maneuverability, which is extremely logical for your fighting style and your current capabilities. However, it does not have much offensive ability, which you have to overcome with your own physical strength. You've done an admirable job conditioning your body, but it's nothing compared to the offensive power that One for All would provide. With the right training, the combination of Fog and One for All could serve to round out your abilities well. Anything else to address? Meekly, Izuku sinks lower into his seat. What if I'm just not good enough? Kid, you have too many people that believe in you for that to be true. Do you think I'm good enough, sensei? Absolutely, Shoyuta tells him honestly. When All Might had first proposed this to Shoyuta, back in Nisa's office last week, Shoyuta had initially been firmly opposed. Who is All Might to say that Izuku isn't good enough as he is? That he needs a physical quirk like One for All when he's already proven himself to be fully capable of becoming a hero with Fog in his creative mind? But when Shoyuta allowed All Might to explain, he realized that All Might wanted to give Izuku One for All because he's proven himself so capable already. I know that boy has the heart to be a hero, All Might had said. That's why I can trust him with a quirk like this. And All Might is right. Izuku would be a great hero with or without the strength of One for All, and that's why he deserves to have it. However, just because I think you could do it does not mean I think you should. The only person that can make a decision on that is you. From what All Might told me, One for all has the potential to be a burden as much as it can be a gift. The quirk itself is dangerous and has the potential to hurt you if not properly controlled. It would require a serious, rigorous training regime for you to even learn to handle it correctly, since it's so different from your current quirk. During this, you wouldn't be exempt from your current studies, you wouldn't be getting any special treatment, problem child, and would be training fog on top of it as well, and that would put you under a lot of stress. It won't be easy. Izuku smiles, albeit a little shakily. That's what you're for, right, sensei? To help me. Sighing, Shoyuta can't quite stop the upturn of his lips. Yes, problem child, that's what I'm here for. Doesn't mean I'll make it easy for you though. Izuku's smile rightfully dims a bit. Additionally, a quirk with a history like that. Even if All Might has defeated All for Who, he told you about All for One, right? Izuku nodded. Okay, good, he did something right for once, then. The point is, there are likely still others that he left behind. A villain like that does not disappear without any lasting impression, and this quirk would paint a large target on your back. This decision is yours and yours alone, Shoyuta says when Izuku chews on his lip quietly, thinking. You have the potential to be a great hero. You wouldn't be in my class if I believed otherwise. You don't need this quirk to succeed. If you decide to take All Might's quirk, it would only be another tool for you to use in your career. A very strong, versatile tool, sure, but you are more than capable without it. It's not the quirk that makes the hero, Izuku mutters distantly. It's how you use it. Shoyuta nods, fighting the proud smile slipping onto his face. He thinks it sneaks into his expression anyway. My advice is that you think about what kind of hero you want to be, and whether this new tool would benefit you in that regard. Simple as that. Someone who can make others feel safe just by their demeanor alone, Izuku had said, back in that hospital room. That's the kind of hero I want to be. I told All Might that I needed to think about it, when he asked earlier. A logical response. Good job, problem child. He said I have until after the break to decide. I'd recommend using all of that time, if you need it. This is a big decision that will impact your career as a hero, so don't rush yourself unnecessarily if he said you have the time to think it over. What do you think I should do? Don't take it. It'll kill you. Izuku, I meant it when I said that this is your decision. It's yours alone. I am glad that you've trusted me enough to seek out my advice, and I hope you ask for others' opinions too, but ultimately you need to make the decision that is best for you. Don't worry about All Might's situation if you say no. He'll be fine. Don't worry about disappointing me, or others, or even society, with your answer. Worry only about yourself. Quietly, Izuku thanks him as he slips out the door. Shoyuta really hopes he heeds his advice. Just this once, let Shirakumo worry about himself more than others. Hello, Aizawa. I do think it's time to discuss the format of your students' practical exams, so please sit. Where's Vlad? I wanted your opinion before I brought anything to him. You see, I have some changes to our usual exam that I would like to propose. Listen up, brats. I have an important announcement. Shoyuta waits a total of 3 seconds for his students to settle. They still need some work, but they're improving. The UA faculty has decided to implement a dormitory system. As of next semester, it will be mandatory for all students to live on campus, or else your enrollment at this school will be terminated. Dorms? Kaminari shrieks gleefully. Ashido cheers, raising her hands skyward. We can all hang out all the time. It'll be totally fun. This decision was not made with your enjoyment in mind, Shoyuta growls, silencing the students' excited murmurs with a glare. It is not intended to be fun. We are doing this solely for your security and protection. Somehow, the students this year have been illogically troublesome. He sweeps a tired gaze across the room to convey that his class is the troublesome one. He hopes the hero killer kids in particular feel the full weight of his disappointment, so the dorms were proposed as a method of keeping an eye on you children. I will reiterate that living in the dorms will be a requirement of your continued enrollment. I'll be speaking with each of your parents to make sure this is not a problem. Any questions? Will there be a curfew? Will the girls share a bathroom with the boys? Do we need chaperones to leave campus? How big are the rooms? Can we have sleepovers? Shoyuta shouldn't have asked. What exactly are you proposing, Nizu? Due to the unprecedented attacks on your students, I think it would be beneficial to review our curriculum for the year. If villains plan to target our students, we should really do our best to prepare them for anything they might face. Hey, Shirakumo. Curiously, Shoyuta listens as he shuffles papers on his desk, watching from the corner of his eye as Hitoshi cuts Izuku off before he can follow Bakugo out the door for the day. Izuku stumbles before he can run into Hitoshi. Oh, hi, Shinza. Did you need something? Yeah, well, I dash. Oi, what's the hold up? Just a minute, Kaken. Wait for me outside. With Izuku briefly distracted, Hitoshi chances a desperate glance toward Shoyuta. He's been nervous about this all week, never having the chance to make many friends in the foster homes he grew up in, and his current social ineptitude making it difficult for him to make friends now. Izuku's kind patience and endless forgiveness for social blunders is what draws Hitoshi to him now, hopeful to finally have a friend. Shoyuta was drawn to Oboro for the same reasons. Shoyuta tries his best to convey encouragement with a firm nod. Sorry, Shinso, I don't have much time. Is something wrong? No, nothing's wrong. I just overheard you talking to Bakugo earlier about not understanding English very well, and you'll really need to figure that out if you want to do well on the final exam. When Hitoshi trails off, Izuku shakes his head. Are you making fun of me? Because I'm really doing my best, even if it's not great. No, not making fun of you. Hitoshi yells, a little too loudly. Shoyuta flinches in secondhand embarrassment as his son mutters, why am I so bad at this, oh my god. Shoyuta wants to intervene, but he promised to let Hitoshi figure this out for himself. Luckily, Izuku waits patiently, even if he still appears confused by the interaction. Finally, Hitoshi collects himself. I was gonna offer to help if you thought you needed it. I've basically had present Mike, as a second dad these last few years, and I'm pretty fluent in English now because of it. If you want, I can tutor you. Oh, you really don't have to do that. I already asked Kaken, and even if he says he won't help me, I know he will if I bother him about it enough, so there's really no need to worry about me. Pathetically, Hitoshi looks back to Shoyuta again, already prepared to give up when this is the farthest he's gotten in a positive social interaction in years, probably. Shoyuta sighs and gestures for him to keep going. Hitoshi blessedly listens. The thing is, I want to help, that is. You can come over sometime this week? Maybe tomorrow if you're free? Maybe we can watch a movie after too, and just hang out. Izuku blinks, and Hitoshi sweats as he processes the question. Finally, he grins. Oh, okay, yeah, if you're sure you want to help me, then that'd be great. Thank you. Now Hitoshi looks surprised, and he nods dumbly. Fuku, tomorrow after school? That works for me. I gotta go, but I'll see you tomorrow. Bye, Shinso. Dazed by the enthusiasm, Shinso waves weakly, long after Izuku has already disappeared through the door. Shoyuta pats him on the shoulder, somewhat sympathetically. Good job, kid. I believe, rather than our usual use of robots, it might be beneficial for the students to go up against a live combatant. And who do you have in mind to be this live combatant? Of course, Bill are already well aware of the students' strengths and weaknesses, after all, making us ideal opponents for this assessment. When Shoyuta returns home from the school, having stayed late to grade papers, he finds Hitoshi and Izuku on the couch together, watching a movie. I thought you two were supposed to be studying. Izuku jolts and nearly falls from the couch in surprise. Hitoshi doesn't stray his gaze from the TV. We are studying. We're practicing our English comprehension by watching movies in English. Looking at the TV screen, Shoyuta can see that the movie is indeed in English with English subtitles running along the bottom. Izuku, having regained his balance, furrows his brows as he reads the quickly moving captions. I have no idea what's happening, Izuku admits forlornly. Doesn't seem like the most effective method of learning. Shoyuta reaches for the remote to switch off the movie. Stop wasting your time and get to work. Hitoshi groans as Izuku graciously grabs his English textbook from where it was discarded on the coffee table. You just needed to trust in the process a little more, Shirakumo. Sorry, Shinso, but I think I trust in the textbook's process a little more. Can you please help me with these exercises? Izuku's eyes, so wide and pleading, are enough to convince Hitoshi to turn off the TV. A feat that Shoyuta struggles with even with Hitoshi's more obedient moods. His own eyes never leaving Izuku's pout, Hitoshi pulls the book between them and opens it to a random page without looking at it. Okay, yeah, sure. I suggest that we pair off the students and match them with a faculty member that will play well with their weaknesses. The assessment will focus on how well they can overcome their own shortcomings in a situation such as this. Then I want Hitoshi. He's still too reliant on his quirk and needs to know how to overcome his opponent without it. An excellent idea. The parent conferences go well, with some notable exceptions. Endeavor is surprisingly willing to send Shudo to the UA dorms and is the only parent to not ask about the school's security measures to ensure his child's safety. In fact, the only question he has for Shoyuta is whether there were cameras in the sports festival stadium's hallways. There were, of course, and whether that footage still existed. It did. Shoyuta tells him he isn't sure, but messages Nizu on his way out the door to ask for a copy of the tape. He's immediately sent a video of the Todorokis in an empty hallway, discussing something heatedly, when a heavy veil of fog covers Endeavor's form. When it dissipates, a shocked Endeavor is absent of his iconic flames, and Izuku steps into frame to stand in front of Shudo. Shoyuta saves the video to his camera roll and makes a mental note to show it to Hizashi later. His visit with the Ida family concludes with him and Tensei alone in the living room after the Ida parents sign the paperwork without much fuss. Shoyuta finds that he can't bring himself to look down, to see his friend's atrophied legs confined to a wheelchair. Tensei seems unbothered. He understands more than most the dangers of the job, and they both know that it could have ended much, much worse. He could have died. Another friend lost to this life. Shoyuta saves his visit with the Bakugas Katsuki and Izuku's guardians for last. He knocks on the door to their house, an oddly average residence, with groomed flower beds in the yard and a well-worn welcome mat on the porch, and Bakuga Mitsuki is the one to greet him. Oh, Aizawa. The boys said you'd be coming by sometime this week, although the brats didn't think to warn me it'd be today. My husband isn't around right now, he's at work, so I'll have to be enough for ya. She gestures for him to come in, and Shoyuta toes his shoes off respectfully in the entry. Glancing around briefly quick enough that it can't be construed as intrusive, he notices an assortment of pictures hung on the walls, most capturing Katsuki and Izuku at different stages of their lives. The one closest to the doorway has them both young enough that they must be toddlers, with Katsuki's hair nothing more than a poof of fluff falling into crimson eyes and Izuku's head covered only by green curls with none of the familiar wisps of fog to accompany it. They're both smiling widely in the picture, sprawled across the grass in matching overalls. Despite Shuda's attempts to keep his glance at the photo brief, Ms. Bakugu catches it. Oh, those boys have been close since they were nothing more than snot-nosed kids. Made Izuku's integration into the family a whole lot easier, that's for sure. Shoyuta hesitates, mulling how to phrase the question without seeming invasive. Has Izuku been under your guardianship long? Ms. Bakugu snorts, collapsing onto the couch with a nod toward a vacant chair for Shoyuta to join her. You can shoot straight with me, Aizawa. Izuku's told me that you were friends with Oboro, so feel free to ask whatever you'd like. I'm sure you got questions. Caught, Shoyuta frowns, but the promise of answers is too tempting to pass up, so he merely sighs and asks, what happened to Shirakumo Inko? She's fine if that's what you're worried about, Ms. Bakugu assures him. Then why dash? You're a parent, right, Aizawa? Even if you weren't, your job wrangling brats like mine all day would give you the gist of it. Assuming you enjoy it, that is. Shoyuta begrudgingly admits to himself that he does enjoy it. Oboro was Inko's entire world. She had him so young that that's how it had to be, but she was a demon good mother. And she loved her son. Shoyuta remembers visiting Oboro's home back in high school. Inko had always been so relentlessly kind, A solid pillar of warmth and comfort for all three of them. She had come to both of their first 2 sports festivals, making separate homemade banners to cheer on all 3 of them in their second year. At 16, Shoyuta was closer to her than he was to his own mother. He hasn't seen her since Oboro's death. Losing Oboro. That sheet effed with her head. That fucker of a husband left her to drown in her grief. Not to mention she had a 1-year-old to care for on top of it. I did a lot of babysitting for her in those first few years, and then when Izuku's quirk came in, and he looked more and more like Oboro every day, it became a bit more than babysitting. I think looking at Izuku every day must have reminded her too much of Oboro, and she just couldn't do it. Poor kid was the sweetest thing too, didn't deserve his own mom to look at him like that, so I did what I could to take care of him. Wasn't till last year that it became official though. Last year. She told that kid that being a hero would kill him like it killed his brother. Said if he wanted to be a hero so bad, then she couldn't be around for it. I ended up signing the guardianship papers the same day that Izuku took the UA entrance exam, and I'm pretty sure none of us have heard from her since. She found a new guy, though, and she's going by his name Midoriya now if you needed to track her down for whatever reason, but Izuku is my kid, so I don't know why you would. He has been for a long time, even if the ink's still fresh on the paperwork. Why hadn't Shoyuta visited Inko? Had he really been so selfish to assume that he was the only one struggling after Oboro's death? He just hadn't wanted to see the look in her eyes when she realized that he'd failed to save her son. Oboro was so excited to be a brother, Shoyuta murmurs, surprising even himself with his words. He was, Ms. Bakugu admits easily. He'd have been a great one too. Izuku never got to grow up with a brother. Good thing that Izuku had Katsuki, she continues, unconcerned with Shuta's absent gaze. And that Katsuki had Izuku in all honesty. Those boys keep each other in check. They may not be blood, but those two are brothers all right. I want to pair Hitoshi with Shirakumo. He's a good example of training more than just a quirk, and I can handle the both of them. Normally I would agree with you, but I'd like to suggest pairing him with Bakugu instead. He, like your own suggestion, is a good example of the importance of physical and mental prowess in situations where the use of a quirk is not ideal. Additionally, he has a stubborn attitude and doesn't play well with others, which is a habit that needs to be curbed as soon as possible. He works very well with Shirakumo but otherwise struggles with his own attitude with other students, and I've sensed some animosity between him and Shinso that I would like them to overcome. During lunch, Hitoshi sits in the classroom with Izuku, Todoroki, and Baku. On the surface, all 4 of them seem to get along well, but Shoyuta notices the underlying tension in how Izuku leads the conversation. The other 3 boys only respond to him directly and never interact with each other, but Izuku takes it in stride, clearly aware of the concealed animosity between his friends and never letting the conversation lull into the threatening awkward silence. Shoyuta decides to force their hand. Shirakumo, he calls. Come here for a moment please. Izuku waffles, rightfully hesitant to leave the 3 other problem children to their own devices, but Shoyuta is impatient, so he raises an eyebrow. Izuku dutifully comes to the front of the classroom, keeping an eye on his friends behind him as he does so. Is there something wrong, sensei? Yes, but not with you. Shoyuta keeps his tone quiet enough that the clearly snooping boys can't overhear. Take a walk to Recovery Girl's office and back. I want to see what they do while you're gone, and they're left to themselves. Is that really a good idea? Possibly not, Shoyuta admits, shrugging indifferently. But you can't play mediator forever. If there's going to be an altercation, better that it happens now where I can control it. Doubtfully, Izuku glances back to his group, then nods slowly. Okay. He signs something quickly to Bakugu as he walks out the door, but Shoyuta can't quite make it out from his angle. As soon as Izuku is out the door, Bakugu switches off his cochlear implant, closing his eyes and resting his head back against his chair. Todoroki and Hitoshi glance at each other, then eat their food in silence. When Hitoshi glances in his direction, suspicious, Shoyuta schools his face into indifference but doesn't break the eye contact. Finally, his son glances at Bakugu, who is still mentally absent, then turns to Todoroki. So Izuku said that I shouldn't? Well, he told me that what I said was really hurtful to you. He didn't explain why. He rushes when one of Todoroki's furrowed eyebrows turns frosty. He just said that I shouldn't say that kind of thing again, and I wanted you to know that I, won't do that? And, you seem kind of chill, huh? That was an unintentional pun. I promise, so I was hoping we could get along, maybe? Sorry, this is weird. I'll just eat my lunch then. Hitoshi does indeed shove a pile of food into his mouth, blushing furiously. Todoroki looks back to his soba, nodding. I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, great. Hitoshi glances at Shoyuta, who nods in approval. Bakugo scrunches his nose, eyes still closed and eyes still disconnected, as if he can smell the reconciliation and doesn't like the scent of it. Hitoshi dithers, reaching out tentatively to poke the sleeping bear, but somehow Bakugo anticipates him before contact. He cracks open a single crimson eye and bares his teeth like a wild animal. Cowed, Hitoshi returns to his food. Shoyuta sighs and returns to grading his papers. Seems like the two will have to settle their differences during the practical exam after all. What about Shirakumo? I believe it would be apt to pair him with Todoroki, who could benefit from Shirakumo's proficiency at strategic quirk use. He tends to focus more on technical skill and strength and could likely learn from Shirakumo's creativity. The studying sessions in Shuta's apartment become a common occurrence in the days leading up to the final exam, and Shoyuta is pleasantly surprised to find Todoroki joining in more often than not. Although he doesn't seem to actually need the help studying, and only occasionally engages with Izuku and Hitoshi about the homework they're working on. When Shoyuta finally asks Hitoshi why Todoroki hangs around for so long when he doesn't appear to need to, Hitoshi tells him, with a significant look, he said he doesn't want to go home. He'd rather be here with us. Shoyuta decides that the dorms might serve more of a purpose than just protecting his kids from bona fide villains. He's glad that they're being implemented. The next time Todoroki comes over, Shoyuta pointedly comments that the cameras of the sports festival arena picked up some interesting interactions in the hallways between competitions. Izuku tenses, face draining of all color, but Todoroki perks up and asks if any of those videos had been saved. Shoyuta happily connects his cell phone to the TV screen, so they can watch Izuku humiliate Endeavor in high definition. Todoroki's lips lift at the edges in the biggest smile Shuta's seen of him yet, and Shoyuta wonders if he's ever been so proud of his students as he is of Izuku for managing to do that. Of course, Shoyuta is more than happy to send the video to Hitoshi, who sends it to both Izuku and Todoroki in their group chat. After that, Shoyuta notices that Todoroki seems a little more comfortable in his home and more willing to participate in Izuku and Hitoshi's conversations. On days that Todoroki doesn't join, the study sessions have a good chance of devolving into a movie or video game night. If Shoyuta were more responsible, he would reprimand his students for fooling around when they're supposed to be studying, but he sees the happy smile on Hitoshi's face, and he can't bring himself to do it. His stupidly soft heart is just too pleased to see his son enjoying himself and forming connections with his classmates. And if Hitoshi sits a little closer to Izuku than is normal for just a friendship, with their legs pressed together as they watch movies, and if Izuku sometimes dozes with his head on Hitoshi's shoulder, well, Shoyuta had already promised himself that he wouldn't comment on it. Hitoshi's been without friends for so long, bounced around in foster homes too quickly to form lasting connections, that Shoyuta doesn't want to mock him for this. He'd rather let their relationship progress naturally than make Hitoshi feel self-conscious about anything. For now, Shoyuta would put his role of teasing parent on hold and be just the supportive parent watching silently from the sidelines. Today, being a supportive parent means making the kids snacks while they play video games. Without Todoroki around to keep them on track, it took less than an hour for Hitoshi and Izuku to give up on their supposed studying and switch to more fun activities instead. Again, Shoyuta decides not to scold them for it, but he does vindicatively slice some carrots for them as a snack. Hitoshi hates carrots. They're in the middle of a game when he comes back to the living room, so he just sets the plate of carrots down on the table in front of them, shuffling Izuku's hair as he moves back to the kitchen. "Thanks, Dad," Izuku says distractedly. Immediately, both cars on screen crash. Shoyuta and Izuku stare at each other silently. Then, abruptly, Izuku stands. I have somewhere to be. He glances at his bare wrist. I'm late. I have to go, right now. He grabs his things, not even bothering to waste time shoving them into his backpack and fumbling with his books as he struggles to open the front door. I have to find a very tall building and jump off of it now. Bye. As the door starts to swing closed behind him, Shoyuta calls, Don't make jokes like that, problem child. He realizes too late that he does indeed sound like a dad. Hitoshi laughs so hard that he falls off of the couch. For the rest of the week, Izuku can't make eye contact with Shoyuta without blushing. Todoroki and Shirakumo are an acceptable pair. Shirakumo needs to learn to be more confident in his strategies, too, and bossing Todoroki around will do him good. Is it safe to assume that you already have someone in mind to be their opponent? Correct. Although, it admittedly wasn't my idea. The day of the practical exams, his students are too confident for their own good, but Shoyuta knows that this confidence is severely misplaced. He smiles to himself, imagining the inevitable despair on their faces when the true nature of the exams is revealed. The moment is just as wonderful as he expected. Kaminari and Ishido physically collapse to the ground in defeat, and most of the other students have gone pale at the idea of fighting their teachers. Hitoshi is the only one to seem relieved, probably having expected his quirk to be useless against the robots and glad to think that he can rely on it now that he's faced with a breathing opponent. That relief won't last long once he knows he's against Shoyuta. As Nizu explains the logistics of the exam, a rather simplistic defeat or escape scenario, Shoyuta takes a moment to look over his students, dressed in their hero costumes in front of him. He's seen them before, of course, in footage of their training with All Might and at the USJ, but he doesn't typically concern himself with the aesthetic choices of his students. Or aesthetic choices in general, really. His own Eraserhead costume is an example of how he values functionality over fashion. This still holds true, of course. But now, there are a couple students whose costumes stand out to him. Unsurprisingly, Hitoshi has clearly modeled his own costume after Shuta's, and it consists of little more than a dark jumpsuit and a thin capture weapon across his shoulders. The only noticeable difference is the mouthpiece, currently hanging just under his jaw. It appears similar to the common model of ventilator used by many heroes, but Shoyuta knows that its true use is to act as an amplifier and modifier for Hitoshi's voice, able to adjust his volume and tone without interfering with the activation of his quirk. Ida is dressed as a near-identical image of Ingenium, all blocky armor and white steel. Shoyuta can't look at him without seeing Tensei, so strong and noble before his career was ended so violently. Shoyuta has to turn his gaze away. Of course, it's Izuku Loud Cloud that he sees next, and that is objectively worse. Yet Shoyuta can't bring himself to avert his eyes. When Shoyuta first saw his costume, in the footage of that first battle trial run by All Might, all he could think was that Izuku was the spitting image of his brother. Now, though, Shuta's focus catches on the differences in his costume just as much as the similarities. It's the jacket that hurts to look at. It's so similar to Oboro's a thick bomber jacket, made of a leather-like fabric with a small patch over the BRST that before, Shoyuta was never able to really see anything else. The design of it is clearly meant to be in homage to the original Loud Cloud and can't be mere coincidence. The color is different, though a dark army green instead of the familiar worn brown, and it's not until now that Shoyuta realizes why. With Izuku standing side by side with Katsuki, it's clear that the two are intended to be a pair. The jacket matches perfectly to the green of Bakugu's grenade-shaped gauntlets, and the similarities don't end there. The other colors of Izuku's costume, the orange-red of his goggles and shoes, the black of his jumpsuit, all directly coordinate to Bakugu. When Izuku turns, Shoyuta notices for the first time the orange X crossing across the back of his jacket, an exact replica of the one on Bakugu's chest. Izuku's costume is an amalgamation of both of his brothers, and apparently Bakugu's influence is heavier than Oboro's. Oboro's costume had been based off of martial artists, with his dark blue GI and the quarter staff strapped to his back. Izuku is made to look more like a fighter pilot. With Bakugu by his side, the two of them combined are a bomber jet eager to see battle. It's no wonder that when Nisa mentions that the students will be paired for their exams, they both instinctively gravitate toward each other. As a duo, they would be formidable. Shoyuta almost laughs aloud at their evident disappointment when they're informed that the pairs have been selected for them. Well, for Izuku it's disappointment. Bakugo appears furious. The matches will be as follows. Nizu announces, and the students straighten in determination as their names are read off. Shinso and Bu. Hitoshi pales suddenly, eyes flickering to his snarling partner, will be against Eraserhead. Somehow, Hitoshi pales even more. Gogo on the other hand, grins maniacally. Shoyuta knows him well enough by now to know that he's eager for the challenge. Todoroki and Shirakumo. The two glance at each other, Todoroki with something akin to relief in his eyes, probably at the realization that he's paired with someone he knows he can trust. Izuku is the only one in the class that Todoroki has had any kind of visible relationship with. Pairing him with anyone else would likely have ended poorly for both him and his partner. Izuku smiles when they make eye contact, but only briefly. Almost to himself, Shoyuta can only barely hear him murmur, "The only faculty member left is." A shadow falls over the pair of them. "Oh no," Izuku whispers. Todoroki and Shirakumo, Nizu reiterates, having paused for dramatic effect, will be facing off against All Might. Plus Ultra and good luck to you all. The kids are given 30 minutes to plan and strategize before the first of the exams start. They'll occur semi-simultaneously, with each exam beginning 10 minutes after the one before. Shoyuta would consider this illogical if All Might's fight wasn't the last, making this an obvious and reasonable ploy to give Todoroki and Shirakumo even just a few more minutes to prepare. While the students find their partners, the teachers congregate outside of hearing range so they can plan in private. Shoyuta finds a spot where he can sit in the grass and stretch while simultaneously keeping an eye on Hitoshi and Bakugo. Not for the nefarious purpose of spying, necessarily. Shuta's just considered that his students will fight each other before they fight him. Predictably, it's Hitoshi who approaches Bakugo, who hasn't moved from Izuku's side. He tries to initiate conversation, but Bakugo very pointedly reaches up to his ear to flick off his cochlear implant. Izuku visibly sighs helplessly, re-angling himself to sign with jittery movements to Bakugo. This, Shoyuta can make out even from his distance, and he eavesdrops unashamedly. Explosion, probably a sign name for Bakugo, and a fitting one, don't be mean. Stop it. Bakugo glares, glancing at Hitoshi, who is watching their conversation with furrowed brows. Shoyuta hasn't taught him sign yet, since most hero students learn it in their second year of school anyway, and it hasn't been a pressing issue before. After determining that Hitoshi can't understand them, Bakugo replies, "He is an a-hole." The gesture Izuku makes with his hands next is not technically a sign but is universally construed as exasperation. "So are you. I do not want to work with him. If you lose, then you can't go to camp with me." "I will not lose." "You will." Tired is strong. Was Shoyuta supposed to be tired? "And you cannot beat him alone. Do not effing doubt me. Please. Do it for me." Izuku turns large, wide eyes on Bakugo, hands clasped together in a begging motion. Bakugo visibly wavers. Then, Izuku strikes. "If I go to camp and you do not, you will be alone with Mom Yell." Angrily, Bakugo turns his CI back on, and Hitoshi jumps when he spins on him. Bakugo barks something in his face, then stomps away, and Hitoshi looks back at Izuku frantically, who just shrugs and gestures in Bakugo's direction. Resigned, Hitoshi trudges after him, but Shoyuta figures that even with Bakugo physically able to hear Hitoshi, there still won't be much communication between the two of them. Todoroki, who has been standing on the outskirts of the conversation waiting for an unintrusive moment, is finally able to approach Izuku safely. Izuku smiles at him, a little wobbly and nervous, and they sit down together on the grass, heads bowed together and speaking quietly. Their match will not be an easy one. Shoyuta hopes they can plan adequately. Shuta's fight against Bakugo and his son is first in the order, so after 15 minutes, he stands leisurely and steps into the shuttle that will take him to the cityscape that will be the exam setting. The boys will arrive themselves in another 15 minutes, so Shoyuta has the advantage of settling into the environment first to get a feel for it. He finds a building about halfway between the cityscape's entrance and the gate that will serve as the finish line should the students decide to evade him rather than capture him. Knowing Bakugo, that strategy will be unlikely. Shoyuta would bet good money that he's planning on attacking him head-on. Hitoshi, under normal circumstances, might prefer the route of escaping rather than direct combat, and he could very well decide to leave his partner and make a break for the exit. That would leave him vulnerable, though, and if Bakugo succumbed to Shuta's expertise, which is a near certainty, he will be easily captured before he can reach the gate. This meant that the most probable course of action would be for both of them to engage Eraserhead in combat. Unwise of them, certainly, but Shoyuta could admit that Bakugo was strong even without his quirk. If they were smart, they could win, but Shoyuta would be sure to make it a challenge. He wouldn't give them their win so easily. Logically, Shoyuta plans to counter their most likely strategy. The building that he settles on, almost in the center of the most direct route to the exit, is relatively shorter than those around him. This provides him less of a vantage point, but Hitoshi would probably be looking for him on the roofs of taller buildings for that exact reason. Shoyuta assumes that, even if the boys plan to capture him rather than simply escape, they would still head directly for the exit gate and hope to find him along the way, and this building puts him right on the edge of their most probable path. Even if he won't be able to see them coming as he would on a taller building, the lower height puts him in a better hearing range, and Bakugo is hardly quiet. He'll likely hear them coming before he sees them, and then he can ambush them as they cross under him. Catching them off guard would certainly be ideal. Shoyuta knows firsthand how powerful Bakugo's quirk is and how expertly he uses it, not just for power but for maneuverability too. It would be imperative to cancel it out for as long as Shoyuta possibly can. Bakugo is powerful without it, certainly, but with it he is near untouchable without a lot of effort that Shoyuta doesn't feel like expending. Canceling Bakugo's quirk would also be important for Hitoshi to see just how important it is to not rely solely on a quirk. Here's the secret of this battle: Shoyuta isn't really aiming to win it. Granted, he isn't going to roll over and let his students win either. That's not the point. The point is to teach his students their own weaknesses and force them to overcome them on the spot. For Bakugo, that weakness is his stubborn attitude and refusal to communicate or participate with others as equals. For Hitoshi, it's his overdependency on his quirk and reluctance to train himself in other areas. Shuta's role in this exam is to provide his students opportunities to persevere over their shortcomings. This means that if Hitoshi continues to rely solely on his quirk, and Bakugo doesn't depend on his partner, they will fail. Shoyuta can beat them easily if this is the case. In fact, the teacher's supposed handicaps aren't even actually weighted. They just give the students the appearance of a fair fight, and it's up to their proctors whether they deserve to pass or not. If Shoyuta sees no progress in addressing their own weaknesses, he'll make sure that they fail. A buzz sounds across the arena, and Nizu's pre-recorded voice announces, "Bakugo and Shinso, exams start." Shoyuta crouches low, and he waits. He doesn't have to wait long. Soon, he can hear Bakugo's explosions coming closer at an incredibly fast rate. When he peeks over the edge of the building, he sees his student barreling down the street, Hitoshi nowhere in sight. If Bakugo had taken off without him at full speed, like Shoyuta expected, Hitoshi would have had no chance of keeping up. Shoyuta sighs. Bakugo's failure to work as a team isn't surprising, but still ultimately disappointing. He doesn't particularly enjoy failing his students, but he will have to if it means teaching him this valuable lesson. Come on, stop hiding. I know you won't let me get to the finish, so come out and fight me already. Shoyuta continues to wait. He waits until Bakugo is almost directly beneath his building, still rocketing forward and hopelessly unaware of Eraserhead above him. That's when Shoyuta drops. He activates Erasure as he falls, and the sudden loss of his propulsive explosions sends Bakugo stumbling forward, coming to a stop just below Shoyuta. Bakugo crouches into a combative stance but spins to look behind himself rather than upward. He's clearly unaware of Eraserhead's tendency to attack from above, then. Because of this, it's easy to fling his scarf ahead of himself, the end of it wrapping around Bakugo before he has any chance of retaliation. He fights valiantly to escape his restraints, but with his quirk cancelled, it's impossible. The capture weapon is built to outlast even stronger opponents than Bakugo. Shoyuda lands, crouched on a raging Bakugo's shoulders, tugging tightly on his capture weapon to secure it over his arms and torso. That was disappointing, Shoyuda remarks as he climbs off of him. Are you alone out here? Where's your partner? I don't need that effing freak to beat you. Lifting an eyebrow, Shoyuda pointedly scans Bakugo's restrained form. Bakugo spits, the glob of saliva landing just at Shuta's feet. Just wait. You'll have to blink sometime, old man, and I'll blast myself out of here, no problem. Shoyuda hums and readjusts Bakugo's restraints so his hands are no longer tucked in the scarf. Instead, they're trapped with his palms pressed just under his neck. Bakugo hisses. You can't beat me on your own. It was foolish of you to refuse the assistance of a partner, and now both of you will fail your exams because of it. Shoyuda leaves Bakugo, bound helplessly in the street, and swings himself onto another building, catapulting himself onto the roof of a tall high-rise. From here, he can see most of the city, including the shape of Bakugo futilely wiggling in his restraints. He can also see the distinct form of Hitoshi, creeping slowly down a nearby street. He's on the outskirts of the city, nowhere near the more direct route taken by Bakugo, and Shoyuda wonders if he'd hoped to avoid Eraserhead entirely by straying so far from the city's center. Hitoshi probably expected that Bakugo would distract Eraserhead for longer, giving him a chance to reach the gate. Instead, he'd only increased the distance between himself and his exit. Bakugo didn't distract Shoyuda for nearly long enough for Hitoshi to even come close to escaping with current route. Foolish. At least Hitoshi is more familiar with Eraserhead's strategies than Bakugo was, sweeping his gaze across the rooftops as he stalks through the streets. It doesn't take long for his eyes to lock onto Shoyuda, still standing far above him. Shoyuda wishes he were close enough to see the look on Hitoshi's face at the sight of him. He'd definitely been hoping to leave Bakugo to deal with Eraserhead during the exam, and even from this distance he's clearly shaken by Eraserhead's leisurely appearance. They both stare at each other for a short second. Then, Hitoshi takes off running. Also foolish. Shoyuda keeps pace with him easily, keeping to the rooftops as Hitoshi sprints through the streets below him. Following his own mental map of the city's layout, Shoyuda eventually jumps into the street, several paces in front of Hitoshi. Rather than face him head-on, Hitoshi predictably veers onto a nearby side street and continues running. Shoyuda returns to the rooftops, catching up quickly. When Shoyuda can finally see Bakugo's writhing form still attempting to break free of the capture. Weapon down the street from them, he makes his move, jumping from the rooftop with his capture weapon already unraveling from his neck. Hitoshi anticipates the attack and, this time with nowhere to run, slashes out with his dominant arm. There's the sound of tearing fabric, and Shoyuda reels in the remainder of his capture weapon, the end of it fluttering listlessly to the ground after being cut from Hitoshi's knife. Wary of the weapon, Shoyuda adjusts his angle as he falls, landing just outside of Hitoshi's reach. Oi, freakazoid! Hitoshi tenses at the sound of Bakugo's voice, but doesn't turn back to look at him. He keeps his eyes trained firmly on Shoyuda. I've already captured your partner. How much longer do you think you can last against me by yourself? To prove his point, Shoyuda lunges forward and easily dodges the swipe of Hitoshi's knife as he cracks a knee into his son's sternum. Hitoshi stumbles backwards, but manages to stay on his feet. He sloppily dodges Shuta's next attack, a roundhouse kick aimed at his head that gave him ample room to duck beneath. Crouched in the dirt, Hitoshi stutters, Eraser. What do you think the Hero Commission would say about you beating up your own son? I am very familiar with how your quirk works, Hitoshi. Shoyuda reminds him, the non-answer not enough to trigger brainwashing. If using it is your only plan against me, you have no hope of winning. Why can't you just dash? Hey fucker, cut me out of here. Shuta's been pushing Hitoshi backward, closer and closer to Bakugo, who has been thrashing more violently with every step. It is only due to their close relationship that Shoyuda can see the exact moment that a fleeting idea flashes in Hitoshi's eyes. Now push. With another, carefully restrained kick, Hitoshi moves close enough to Bakugo that the blonde could probably bite at his ankles, which Shoyuta thinks he might actually do. You can't be a hero with only your quirk, Shinso, Shoyuta growls. A quirk doesn't make a hero. If you don't put effort into other areas of yourself, you won't last long in this career. You'll die. Without hesitation, Hitoshi slices his knife through the capture weapon acting as Bakugo's prison. As Bakugo bursts free, Hitoshi flings his own unraveled capture weapon at Shoyuta, not to restrain him, which wouldn't have worked well anyway, but to simply obscure his vision. He loses his line of sight for only a moment as he swats down the loose capture weapon, but it's enough time for Hitoshi to shout, "Can you do a flashbang?" And for Bakugo to reply by, somehow, setting off an explosion reminiscent of a flashbang. Obviously. At the sudden light, Shoyuta is forced to clamp his eyes shut as searing pain spikes through his temples. For some reason, his quirk has always made him abnormally photosensitive to bright lights like those, so it took him several painful seconds, literally painful. He'll have a headache for hours afterwards to reorient himself. He finally manages to open his eyes again. Hitoshi and Bakugo are gone. They couldn't have made it down the street in that amount of time, even if Bakugo had grabbed Hitoshi and ran. They have to be somewhere nearby, so Shoyuta holds his breath and listens. A large part of underground heroics isn't just staying silent. It's also listening for others who are trying to stay silent and failing. Bakugo and Hitoshi, students who haven't learned the tricks of silence yet, fell into this later category. In a controlled environment like this, with no noise pollution, it doesn't take long for Shoyuta to pick out quiet shuffling and forcibly light breathing nearby. He follows the sounds to a building adjacent to the street, with the window barely cracked wide enough for a high schooler to slip through. Keeping to the exterior walls, Shoyuta stays low and out of sight as he creeps toward it. He stops as soon as he can make out quiet conversation. "Okay," Hitoshi's voice, "if he hasn't found us yet, then I think we're okay for now, but keep quiet. We shouldn't be hiding. Heroes don't hide. They do when they need to come up with a plan, which we could have done earlier if somebody hadn't ignored me and gone off by himself." Hitoshi's voice, while still hushed, has shifted into a grating hiss that feels unnatural in the city's silence. He's lucky that Shuta's already found them and decided to let their conversation play out. Otherwise, the abrasive tone would have given their location away anyway. "I didn't need your help. Didn't seem that way when I found you tied up like a spicy burrito. Something tells me that even if you were there, you wouldn't have been much help." For a moment, Shoyuta can only hear the sound of their slow breaths. "You're right," Hitoshi finally admits, and Shoyuta grins in the privacy of the empty city. What? What? You don't think you're right? Weird, you seem so arrogant." Bakugo snarls lowly, but Hitoshi continues. "Eraserhead knows my quirk and how it works. Without it, I'm nothing." "Demon, right, you're not. You might be in the hero course with me, but we are not on the same FING level. You're just some DMN extra that got there through luck, you understand? You beat Deku and all the others with FING luck. Have you put any effort into this, or does it not even matter to you?" "I haven't," Hitoshi whispers, so quietly that Shoyuta has to shuffle closer to the open window to hear it. "Compared to you and Shirakumo, I really haven't tried hard at all, have I?" Then louder. "Is that why you hate me so much? I don't waste my time with lazy but nobodies. If you want to hang with me and Deku, you gotta fucking work for it, freakazoid. You're AD-. You know that." There's a huff of breath, like Bakugo snorted air quickly through his nose. Another sound just too out of place in this environment, Shoyuta notes. He'll move stealth training up earlier in the curriculum. Hitoshi continues, "What gives you the right to decide who's on your level? Or on Shirakumo's? Yeah, maybe I need to train myself harder now to earn my place as a hero, but I still won those fights fairly, even if the surprise of my quirk gave me advantage. I still beat you. You didn't beat me. You beat Deku. You're really playing the part of overprotective boyfriend, aren't you? I told you already that he's my FNG brother. Shut up." Their volume is increasing now. Shoyuta is definitely moving stealth training to right after the break. Deku's FING mom was watching. Did you know that a-hole? Oh no, Shoyuta thinks. This is entering more personal territory. As a teacher, should he interrupt? Unfortunately, his curiosity gets the better of him. He keeps listening. The same mom that abandoned him because he was too weak to survive as a hero and she just couldn't bear to watch another son die. Bakuga's voice raises in pitch, sharp and mocking. Deku begged her for FING weeks to watch him in the festival because he wanted to prove to that beach that he wasn't weak like she thought. And then you show up with your FING quirk and your FING attitude, and you destroyed it for him. Deku trained himself almost to FING death, and you ruined it with a single FING question. No effort at all. That's why I hate you, Shinso. Shoyuta expects Hitoshi to cower into silence. Instead, he rises to the challenge. I didn't know that, and I'm sorry I hurt Shirakumo that way. I really am. But I had my own things to prove, Bakugu, and the sports festival was my chance to do that too. I refuse to regret my victory, even if I do regret how I did it and that it came at a cost to the one person I consider a friend. And Shirakumo has told me he's forgiven me, so what gives you the right to hold a grudge? He shouldn't have forgiven you. He forgives way too easily, and I should no, Bakuga hisses. I've said some cruel FING shit to him, shit I'm still trying to make up for, and he still considers me a friend. He doesn't know what's best for himself. You know, my therapist would tell you that it sounds like you're taking out your self-hatred on me, Bakugu. You fucker dash. Did I hit a nerve? Sounds like it was true then. I'm effing leaving. Shoyuta had really hoped they would finally figure themselves out a little bit. It sounds like Hitoshi has at least realized his own shortcomings in his dependency on his quirk, but if Bakugu walks away now... Wait, stop. Miraculously, Shoyuta no longer hears Bakugu's footsteps. He stopped. I don't think I should have said that. I mean, I think it's true, and you're an a-hole, but I shouldn't have psychoanalyzed you like that. In fairness, though, you weren't being that nice either. Bakugu stays silent, but he still doesn't move. Let's make a deal, alright? Neither of us want to be here right now, and neither of us want to fail. As much as you might hate it, we need to work together to pass. So can we just, I don't know, get along for however long it takes us to beat Eraserhead, and then we can pretend like it never happened. A thud. Bakugu sat back down. Fine. Silence for a moment. Deku would tell me to apologize. Are you going to? Hell no. Silence again. Is Bakugu actually thinking before he speaks? Not yet. Not until I can tell that you FNG deserve it. Fair enough, Hitoshi admits. After this, after we pass, I mean, because I refuse to lose, maybe I can train with you and Shirakumo? I just don't really know where to start. Bakugu hesitates. I can't do anything to stop you, I guess. Do whatever you want. For Bakugu, that is almost a screaming approval. I look forward to it. Silence again. More awkward this time too. Shoyuta wishes he can teach his students how to socialize like proper human beings. Although he doubts he'd be the best teacher for that class. Finally, Bakugu coughs. So do you have a plan, or are we gonna sit around and waste our time? Rather than continue listening in, Shoyuta leaves them to plan. He waits for them near the exit. If they're smart, they'll head straight to the gate and end this quickly. He hears Hitoshi first, stepping as quietly as he can on an adjacent roof, taller than Shuta's to stay out of sight. Bakugu, meanwhile, comes barreling down the street shortly afterward, clearly intended to be a distraction from the imminent ambush from Hitoshi. A fair plan, Shoyuta can admit. For someone less experienced than Eraserhead, it would be natural for their attention to focus entirely on Bakugu and assume that he's simply abandoned his partner again, leaving them open to be attacked by Hitoshi from above. Even now, when Shoyuta is fully aware of their plan, he is still forced to make a decision. He can attempt to apprehend Bakugu, as their plan clearly intends him to, and put himself at risk of whatever Hitoshi will do. If he focuses on Hitoshi, though, Bakugu will have a clear shot to the gate and they'll win handily. Of course, Shoyuta has subconsciously formulated several of his own plans that would counter theirs, but he won't be victorious today. He decided that earlier, after hearing their conversation in that building. Hitoshi has recognized the fault of over-reliance on his quirk, and Bakugo has agreed to set his animosity aside and work with a partner. They've already passed Shura's test, even if they don't know it. In the end, Shura's curiosity wins out, and he decides to play into their plan. He ignores Hitoshi creeping up behind him and waits for Bakugo to run beneath him, like he had before. Predictably, the moment before Shoyuta would have dropped down onto Bakugo, Hitoshi drops down on him instead. Shoyuta slows his own reaction time, pretending as if he had been caught off guard, and provides Hitoshi an opportunity to make the first move. Admittedly, he doesn't expect for the sudden loss of his vision as rough fabric is wrapped tightly around the upper half of his face. The texture is familiar. Enough that Shoyuta deduces that this is Hitoshi's capture weapon acting as a makeshift blndfld. Even without his sight, Shoyuta spins and lashes out with a high kick, aimed high enough that it should make contact with Hitoshi's cheek if he doesn't dodge. In the same movement, he reaches into the many pockets of his jumpsuit, aiming to grab a knife and cut himself out of the blndfld. His kick is blocked, as expected, but it was intended to serve more as a distraction than an offensive ploy. He just needed to get his knife, and there's a series of explosions, too close, and Shoyuta is forced to jump backwards, aborting his grab for the knife in favor of covering his face from the sudden heat. Bakugo has joined them. Eraserhead, blinded, against two hero students is not a good matchup. Maybe, if he weren't already so willing to let his students have this victory, he could have taken them even with such a blatant disadvantage. Actually, he definitely could have. Eraserhead's been in worse situations than this and found creative ways to persevere. But in this scenario, it seems to be more effort than it's worth. Still, he needs to put on a show. The students need to believe that they truly won, after all, and if Shoyuta makes his surrender too obvious, Bakugo will surely throw a fit. So, he listens intently, pinpointing their positions, and launches his capture weapon at Bakugo while simultaneously lunging at Hitoshi. Without being able to erase Bakugo's quirk, it would be too risky to fight him blindly. Hitoshi he can combat more safely. Either way, Eraserhead has lost. It's just a matter of time, but Shoyuta would rather walk away from this without injury. Just as he expected, he hears Bakugo evade his scarf with a well-timed explosion, and he feels a hand grab at the back of his jumpsuit just as fist brushes against Hitoshi's chest. Shoyuta is yanked down to the ground, flipped and pinned by Bakugo. Hitoshi clips the quirk-suppressing cuffs to his wrist. A buzzer sounds. Bakugo and Shinso have passed their exam. Congratulations! Bakugo roars, and Shoyuta can only imagine the relieved grin on Hitoshi's face, but he knows it's there. Good job, problem children. You did well, he tells them. And he means it. Hisashi, dressed as Present Mike and hilariously pale in the face, greets Shoyuta when he and his students return to the rest of the group. Shoyuta can't help but snort at his friend's gaunt expression. Bugs. Hisashi sighs. Yep, just like you thought. Why do you always gotta be right, Sho? It's a curse. Hey, your match took a long time though. And you lost. The little listeners give you trouble? Is Eraserhead losing his touch? We're just that FANG good, Bakugo boasts. Beside him, Hitoshi is grinning, genuinely. He's been doing that more often lately. They approached with a logical plan in the end, Shoyuta admits, but turns to stare down Bakugo from the corner of his eye. Although I should remind you that I was handicapped. In this situation, not really, but they didn't need to know this, and if this were an actual fight, I would beat you without problems. Hitoshi laughs. Yeah, whatever you say. Come on, hothead, let's go watch the other exams. Someone's gotta still be going if we didn't go straight back to the classroom. Hisashi and Shoyuta watch them disappear into the viewing room, and Shoyuta turns a curious eye on his friend. What are the results so far? There's only one exam still going. All Mights. Unsurprising, considering it was the last to begin and by far the most difficult to pass. For everyone else, though, only 2 teams bit the dust. Mina and Kaminari got taken down way quick, and Kirishima and Sata couldn't outlast Cementos. Technically, Siro and Yaoyorozu passed, but Siro was snoozing the whole time, so you might decide to grade him differently based on that. She made him a gas mask, and he still managed to get put under by midnight, Can you believe that? Shoyuta nods, glancing at the doorway leading into the viewing room. How are Shirakumo and Todoroki doing? Hisashi hisses through his teeth, and Shoyuta raises an eyebrow, silently demanding that he explain. It's bad, he admits slowly. Kinda hard to watch actually. All Might is being a little relentless, and the poor kids can't get a hit in or find a way to escape. Nodding, Shoyuta prepares himself. He knew that this match would be ugly to watch the minute Nizu told him the pairing, but he can't be biased right now. He walks past Hisashi and into the room. On the large video screen is All Might. He has Shirakumo Izuku clenched tightly in his grip, one massive hand holding him by the neck as Izuku chokes. Shoyuta can only watch as Yagi smashes Izuku into the ground, hard enough that the ear-splitting crack can be heard through the poor audio of the footage. Izuku visibly wheezes, blood trickling from his mouth as he strains in All Might's grip. He hadn't even had the time to cushion the blow with his fog like should have seen him do countless times before. Izuku's tired then, or not thinking straight, or even suffering from quirk exhaustion if he couldn't summon his fog for a hit like that. I think he's forgotten the purpose of these exams, Shizenji murmurs. Seeing All Might's unrestrained brutality, Shoyuta has to agree. These exams aren't intended to be real battles between the students and pro-heroes, even if that's what the kids were led to believe. The teachers are supposed to show their students their weaknesses and give them opportunities to learn from them. Right now, All Might is showing his students that he's stronger than they are and giving them no hope to overcome him. Through the crackling audio feed, someone yells, "Cover!" And Izuku, still choking on the ground, veils himself in a layer of fog just as flames roar over him and creep over All Might's arm. Instinctively, All Might releases Izuku and a wall of ice immediately forms between them as Todoroki skates into frame, grabbing Izuku and hoisting him into his arms as they dash away. Izuku says something inaudible to Todoroki, who nods just as All Might breaks free from that formed around the side of his body. Todoroki veers through the opening of a decrepit, abandoned-looking building, and All Might follows them in. The camera changes to one inside the building, showing the large, open floor plan of a warehouse, the crumbling roof held up by concrete pillars. Todoroki sets Izuku on his feet, watching him as he regains his balance and shakes his head out. The hit from earlier probably gave him a concussion at least. Shoyuta can only imagine what other, more serious damage might have been done. Again, Izuku murmurs something to Todoroki, too quiet to be picked up by the building's mics. The speed of his words and the way that he cuts himself off as All Might comes into view leads Shoyuta to believe that Izuku had been formulating some kind of plan. He hopes it'll be enough for All Might. For a moment, Shirakumo and Todoroki stand in the middle of the warehouse, facing All Might. Each waits for their opponent to make the first move. "What's wrong, young heroes?" All Might laughs. "Afraid to face me?" Todoroki frowns, shifting his stance indicatively of making an offensive move. Next to him, Izuku shakes his head. When the students don't take his bait, All Might shrugs. "No matter. I can always come to you." And he dashes forward. Both Izuku and Todoroki launch themselves to the side in opposite directions, forming platforms of fog and ice beneath their feet as they ascend to the ceiling. "Don't get hit!" Izuku yells, narrowly avoiding a sickening punch from All Might that cracks the cement of the pillar just behind him. "You can't avoid me forever." All Might taunts, his fist smashing into the ceiling just above a ducking Todoroki. Only cowardly heroes won't face a villain head-on. "That's not Deku's style," Bakugo observes, watching his brother ricochet between fog platforms. "BSTRD doesn't run from a fight. He's planning something." Shoyuta turns back to the screen, brow furrowed. If he does have a plan, it's subtle enough that not even he can tell what it is. The next strike from All Might makes contact, sending Izuku flying into a pillar on the edge of the room with an awful thunk. Shoyuta flinches, watching Izuku's eyes flutter as he struggles to stand, Todoroki distracting All Might from his prone teammate as he recovers. Hisashi, standing close enough to feel Shura's minute reaction, presses his shoulder against his comfortingly. For a moment, with Izuku sitting limp at the base of the pillar, Shoyuta had imagined that the impact had killed him. Izuku manages to stand, though, but his eyes don't seem to focus correctly. Nevertheless, he rolls out of the way of another hit from All Might, letting it hit the pillar behind him instead. He dashes for Todoroki, who jumps from his icy ledge to land on the ground beside him, backs pressed to one of the warehouse's walls. Do you think that's enough? Todoroki asks. Izuku gestures to the side of his head, where dark blood is matting his curls. I think it'll have to be. Wait for him to get to the center. All Might pulls his fist from the center of the pillar he had punctured through and turns as debris falls to his feet. Are you done running, little heroes? Because I'm happy to meet you over there. He dashes forward again, aiming straight for Todoroki and Izuku. This time, the students plant their feet and lower themselves into a defensive position. For a moment, Shoyuta thinks that they've had enough. They've grown tired of this cat-and-mouse game and decided that they'll take their chances facing All Might head-on, even if it'll surely end in their defeat. Shoyuta is wrong. Todoroki now. Both of his students are suddenly engulfed in thick fog, disappearing from sight as a surge of fire erupts outward from their position. The blast spreads through the entire warehouse quickly. Although it's thin enough that All Might doesn't falter in his run, it melts the thick bands of ice created by Todoroki earlier to evade All Might. Simultaneously, the leftover platforms of fog used by Izuku disappear in a blink. Shoyuta suddenly understands. He had assumed that the abandoned sections of fog and ice had simply been forgotten by Izuku and Todoroki in their desperate attempts to dodge All Might's blows. Instead, they had served a strategic and vital role in supporting the ceiling's infrastructure as All Might unintentionally destroyed the building's support around them. Without the platforms, the building collapses. Directly on top of them. Shirakumo. For the second time in his life, Shoyuta can only watch as Loud Cloud is crushed beneath rubble.